Welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls Podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, series, and more.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode, where we're covering chapters 23 through 31 of A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. But before we dive into this episode, please listen closely to our content warning. While we're focusing our discussion on chapters 23 through 31 and book 2, we are going to bring in themes, foreshadowing, lore, and other insights across the ACOTAR series. So yes, that means these episodes are spoiler central for all of the ACOTAR books. These ACOMAF deep dives do not, however, include spoilers for the rest of Sarah J. Maas's series, except at the end of every episode, where we include our Maasverse Madness segment. We'll give a big old spoiler warning beforehand, so if you haven't read the Maasverse, you can leave the episode right there, no worries at all, or you can keep listening for Throne of Glass and /or Crescent City crossover callouts.
So with all of that said, if you did not know that Cassian is about to meet and get flipped off by his own mate, all in one episode, then please go finish the books. Spoiler, we will be here when you're done.
Next up, we at Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books. In other words, friends, this podcast is rated R.
Reese has been told that he's very good at licking, and honestly, I believe him, and we'll be talking about it endlessly on today's episode, so please be mindful of little listening ears.
As we head into summer, we're so excited to be podcast partners at several live events.
We will be at LeakyCon in Portland, Oregon this July 5th through 7th. Get your ticket for 10% off at the link in the show notes.
And we'll be at the Dragon Gauntlet event in Boyne City, Michigan this August 16th and 17th. We're hosting a live show at both of these events and participating in tons of other activities. Links to LeakyCon and Dragon Gauntlet are in the show notes.
We also have extra special discount codes for both of these events for our lovely Patreon members. So be sure to head to your Patreon portal for more details. Also, this Saturday, May 25th, we will be vendors and attendees at Fantastique Collections' Velaris Starfall Ball in Larkspur, Colorado. If you're attending, be sure to stop by our booth for ACOTAR-themed games, trivia, so much more, and we cannot wait to party with you into the evening.
And of course, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and this ACOMAF journey we are on together, if you want more content, more community, more events, and so much more, please check out our Patreon.
We have 2 membership tiers that you can join. The Valkyries for $5 a month, which includes access to our Boppin' Discord, live Q&As from Lexi and I, community events, a book club. We just did a book 1 trivia for ACOTAR. It was so much fun. Plus a 20% off discounted merch store. That is, again, for $5 a month. Or you can join the High Fae, which includes everything from the Valkyrie level, plus early access to ad-free episodes, our full episode outlines, and special voting privileges, all for $10 a month. And this is the number one best way that you can support us in growing and just being a fantasy fangirl.
Join the party at patreon.com/fantasyfangirls. The link is also in the show notes or YouTube caption, depending how you're tuning in. And like Nicole said, really and truly, thank you so much for supporting us as we turn this dream into our livelihood. It means the absolute world to us, and we just appreciate you so much.
And now it is time to eat some nicely spiced food that makes us feel awake. I need some awakeness right now, so this is good.
Always, Nicole is going to open this discussion with a summary of what happens in chapters 23 through 31. Buckle up, friends. We got a long one here today. Gather round. We need an Inner Circle Debrief.
Chapter 23. Ding dong, Archeron family. Fae-vorite is back. Answering the door, the housekeeper is reluctant to let in a sus-looking Fae-vorite into her family's house. But Elaine, seeing her sister, who she thought was dead, begins to cry. But Nesta, in a cold voice, I know, shocking, tells Mrs. Laurent to let her sister in. Sitting in the living room, Fae-vorite unveils her Fae form, and once upon a time, she tells her sisters the full Under the Mountain story and her place in this new, much more awesome court. Then she swoops in with the ask of the Archeron sisters to use their house as base to chat with the queens. Nesta fuck knows the idea for many reasons, but at the top of that list is that it would jeopardize Elaine's upcoming marriage with the son of a man who hunts and hates fairies. Awesome. But Elaine, Elaine, being useful for the first time in our series, convinces Nesta to help Feyre, reminding Nesta that this is the sister who literally kept them alive for 8 years because apparently she forgot. Chapter 24, the Bat Boys enter the house and are introduced to the two Artron sisters. Everyone is noticeably uncomfortable or outright hostile. Oh, the irony given where everyone's romantic stories go. Get everyone because we're back in the dining room. Asriel and Elaine engage in polite conversation about flying while Nesta and Cassian attempt to not murder each other across the table. Don't worry, Nessian, you'll be doing some very different type of dining room behavior under a table very soon. After a dinner from Sisterly Hell, Rhys, Feyre, Cassian, and Asriel write a letter to the queens requesting to meet with them. But then Rhysand and Feyre go off to their room, and there's only one bed, but damn it, Rhys summons a bed from his room of requirement. Soon, friends, we'll get there soon. These two share delightful chatter about family dynamics, Feyre's birthday, which is on the winter solstice, aka the longest night of the year, and who will win in an Nessian fight. My money, like Rhysand and Feyre's, is also on Nesta. Chapter 25. The next day, Feyre is training with Rhys in the woods around the Artron estate. Rhys tells Feyre to light a candle, douse it with water, and then dry the wick, all using magic. She tells him to go away because she can't perform with the shadow daddy presence around. That will change, but he obliges, leaving her with her homework assignment. Hours pass and no sparks yet. At least not from Feyre's magic, but these two lovebirds are creating some sparks of their own, beginning their first passing of notes, aka the Rhys and Feyre version of Prithian texting. However, catching her off guard, something grabs Feyre from behind. It's none other than Adder Bartok, ready to kick her, sir. Chapter 26, our Bartok Batboy doesn't get a chance to do his kicking vengeance because Rhys appears and binds the Adder. The Adder begins spilling the tea, confessing that the King of Hybern asked him to kidnap Feyre. Why? He doesn't know. You're not as good at spilling the tea as our good friend Google Suriel, sir. Asriel takes the Adder to the Night Court to do some geeking of his own. Feyre, furious with Rhys that he used her as bait to see who would come a kick-knockin' when she was left alone, begins shoving him in anger. But Rhys taunts her until our girl winnows directly in front of the smug High Lord of the Night Court. Chapter 27. Feyre, raging at Rhys, tells him to never use her in a scheme or else she's gone. He apologizes. That's it. That's the chapter. Chapter 28. Back in Velaris, Rhys shows Feyre the Adder interrogation and the information they gleaned from him. Spoiler alert, it ain't a lot. Rhys orders Asriel to maim the Adder and then drop him off the coast of Hybern to send a message. The message is, fuck you, Hybern. Later, Feyre writes a note to Tamlin telling him that she left of her own free will, that she is safe and that she will not return, which we imagine that Tamlin received and was like, I didn't know you could read. Feeling lighter than she has in months, she asks Rhys to take her on a night on the town. As she's getting ready for the night out, Amren arrives in Feyre's room and Feyre gives her the amulet back. But what's this? Amren reveals that there was no magic to this amulet whatsoever. Chapter 29. Walking the streets of Velaris like a group of snacks, Feyre is shocked at the normalcy of how the city interacts with the Inner Circle, aka some of the most powerful people in the realm. And our Inner Circle enjoys a lovely, wonderful dinner with spices galore. More Cassian and Asriel, too full to sleep, go clubbing instead. Clubbing on a full stomach sounds like absolute torture to me, but maybe that's actually just clubbing in general. Feyre and Rhys skip out on the raging and instead walk through the city, stopping to listen to some familiar sounding music. The same music that Feyre heard in her cell under the mountain. Confirming that he was indeed the person to keep her from breaking, Rhys picks her up and flies her home. The texting continues and gets rather scandalous before Feyre bids him goodnight. Rhys tells Feyre that she's welcome to lick him anywhere, and Nicole's pulse skyrockets. Chapter 30. In a training session with Cassian, Feyre is practicing her hand-to-hand combat and also practicing oogling at a shirtless High Lord sparring with a Shadow Singer. A painting flashes into her brain. Death on swift wings. Cassian abruptly asks her about the letter she wrote to Tamlin, which she snaps back about his complex relationship with Mor, challenging her to 121-2 punches for mouthing off. Cassian continues to press Feyre about the question out of concern and seeing if she needs to talk about her breakup. Feyre doesn't talk though, and instead begins to realize just how twisted her relationship with Tamlin was. She begins crying and unknowingly uses fire magic to burn through the punching pads. Rhys steps in for Cassian and tells her that the guilt for killing the innocent fairies will be with her forever, but she does have the power to learn to live with it. He creates peaceful darkness around her in the training ring, reminding her that not all darkness is evil. Chapter 31. Training montage! Feyre continues training with Cassian on combat and Rhys with magic. One day in the sparring ring with Cassian, plus the spectators of Amren and Mor, Rhys enters and we learn that the summer court is finally ready for their presence. Cassian is nervous, wondering if it's a trap and wishes to go, but Cassian, you're banned from the summer court. I mean, it was just leveling one building. Regardless, for Amren, Rhys, and Feyre, it's time to go steal a book.
We are all right here because of our love for stories. And I know there are some stories about our dad's life in particular that I truly never get tired of hearing. From hilarious to heartfelt to what? His retelling of life's events always bring us so much joy. Just in time for Father's Day, we have the perfect gift that captures all of his stories for our family forever. It's called Storyworth. Storyworth helps you preserve precious memories and stories from your dad or father figure for years to come.
Each week, Storyworth emails your loved one one thought-provoking question that you get to help pick. Things like, what are your favorite movies? What are your proudest moments? Or one of my personal favorites, did you ever get a terrible haircut? All your loved one needs to do is respond to that email with the story. Long or short, doesn't matter. Then, after a year of fun questions, Storyworth compiles your loved one's stories and photos into one beautiful keepsake hardcover book that you'll be able to share and revisit for generations to come. You can even keep a copy of the book for yourself.
I am so excited to share our dad's Storyworth book with my kids as they get older, so they can learn all sorts of fun and meaningful memories about their puppy straight from him. Family is everything to us, and I love how Storyworth makes it easy to capture these stories and memories to pass down to children, grandchildren, and beyond.
Give all the fathers in your life a unique, heartfelt gift you'll all cherish for years, Storyworth. Right now, save $10 off your first purchase when you go to storyworth.com/fantasyfangirls. That's storyworth.com/fantasyfangirls to save $10 off your first purchase.
It's time to step into the cauldron and discuss key insights, character analysis, foreshadowing, theories, and oh, so much more. We pick up right where we left off with Fae-vorite arriving at the Archeron house, and we really realize how much has changed in only 1 year, specifically how she killed a fairy with hate in her heart. Since then, not only did she fall in love with a fairy, but she killed 2 more with love in her heart. Killing those 2 innocent fairies has destroyed her, and she's now on her healing journey. Not to mention, hey, she's become High Fae herself. Wow. Talk about a big year.
We start this wintry time in the human lands with a quick plant watch. Amongst the snowy houses, they are decorated with evergreen and holly. Evergreen symbolizes life and hope, and holly in Christianity is a symbol of the crown of Jesus with the red berries symbolizing the drop of blood. But holly also has symbolism for eternal life. I do think that these 2 plants are more for us readers as a timestamp. Evergreen and holly are two typical plants that are often used in Christmas decorations. However, that does slightly confuse me because later when Rhys and Fae-vorite are talking about her birthday being on the winter solstice, which is typically around December 21st, Rhys is surprised saying that it was months ago. So I actually think that this is around March when we're coming to the human lands, and maybe the humans are like me and they just don't take down their Christmas decorations until late March, early April.
Correct. It is late March right now, which makes sense because Fae-vorite notes that it is the end of winter. So whether these decorations are just more, I'll say, symbolic rather than lingering decorations from their winter solstice, which, yes, Nicole, we really need to talk about how you keep your Christmas decorations up that long. It drives me crazy.
I like my Christmas tree. It makes me happy. Now, the whole reason these plants are brought up in Fae-vorite's POV is because they are the only bit of celebration that humans do after the fairy overlords 500 years ago outlawed holidays after the war.
Well, and Fae-vorite thinks about how 3 months ago with Amarantha, it almost destroyed her. But 500 years ago, there were a lot of rulers like Amarantha, and they held power over the humans for a millennia. Quote, I couldn't begin to imagine what millennia with High Fae like her might do. The scars it'd leave on a culture, a people.
This really slapped me in the face when doing this deep dive because, yeah, that's a really great point, Fae-vorite darling. What I would give, I think I would really enjoy this, like a pre-war or like a prequel of the war and the treaty. Maybe not wholly from the human's perspective because that would just rip my heart out, but like a split perspective of like the Valkyries, Rhys, and the Bat Boys and the humans.
I agree. It would be so good. And it'd also be so brutal.
Yeah.
Like it would be a tough read, but it'd be really insightful, especially the Valkyries. This small mention of condemning holidays because they're a reminder of their previous immortal overseers, it's a glimpse into what we're about to experience with the deep prejudices between the humans and Fae. For instance, Elaine's fiance's father who hates and hunts Faes, the mortal queen's distrust, it's also just a way of highlighting just how divisive these 2 species are and how difficult it will be for our inner circle to work toward becoming allies with humans.
Fae-vorite is greeted at the door by the housekeeper, who we will later learn is Mrs. Laurent, who is hesitant to let Fae-vorite in. Not even Elaine, shaking with happy sobs at the sight of seeing Fae-vorite again, does Mrs. Laurent even open the the door wider. I think she even like kind of grips onto it tighter. I don't think she closes it, but she's like, you ain't coming in here, bitch. It's not until a mystery voice, Nesta, from the top of the stairs says for Mrs. L to draw them up some tea, then Mrs. Laurent opens the door and lets her sister in. I love that it is Nesta who verbalizes to let Fae-vorite into the house, even though in just a few sentences and just a few paragraphs, she's about to say that she's not welcome here, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Seeing Elaine again now that Fae-vorite is Fae reminds us just how much she has gone through since seeing her sisters late last summer. The memory of Elaine and the driving need to protect her helped give her strength in the dungeon under the mountain. None of these sisters thought they would see each other again, and this reunion, at least with Elaine, is so heartbreakingly sweet.
It's important to note how Fae-vorite is describing herself. She's describing herself as a ghost, a phantom in the snow. The last time she was here, she was a lovesick human about to run off to save Prythian and literally die in the process. She is a ghost in her own eyes. She is resurrected as something different from what she was previously. She's more mysterious, and she's also not the sister that they knew in so many ways.
Well, and then she goes on to feel like her sisters let in a wolf, which is the exact same language Fae-vorite used to describe herself in the Weaver's cottage. As this very different person, she has an agenda and is about to bring her sisters into this war because it is the only way. She thinks of herself as a wolf now that she is Fae, reminding herself of her power and enhanced capabilities. But this situation, of course, is very different from the Weaver because she recognizes that as this very different person, she is about to alter her sisters' lives, and not for the better.
Well, and speaking of that same language, when we hear the word wolf, who else do we think of? We think of Andrus, something that altered Feyre's life forever and ultimately for the better, but not for a while given what happened under the mountain. As these three sisters go to sit, Elaine and Nesta have two very different types of reactions to Fae-vorite even before learning about her Fae-ness. Elaine is kind, elated to see her sister, who again, she never thought she would see again. She assumed Fae-vorite was dead, which she wasn't far off, I guess. Nesta is cold, short, no words of love or relief, and it's very on brand for Nesta. Remember when Fae-vorite was home last book, she spent time bonding with her two sisters, gardening with Elaine, and only after telling Nesta her story about Tamlin and opening up to her about what's happened, she then taught Nesta to paint. I'll say that's when they shared some of their warmest, I'll call it lukewarmest moments together, Nesta and Fae-vorite.
Well, and even during those moments, like you said, Nesta wasn't warm, but she was open to conversation, which led them to be able to connect in a way they never had before.
And here we can see those lukewarm moments with Nesta. They are gone. They are brushed under the rug, never to be seen again. To the point that Fae-vorite will ask after revealing that she is Fae if she's included in the no Fae in the house rule. And Nesta stays silent, confirming that you are no longer welcome here. We no longer see you as family. Ouch.
Yep. She's drawing a line in the sand. That previous connection was largely because they were the only two who knew what was going on with Tamlin. Nesta had been alone in her own knowledge of Prythian and Tamlin taking Fae-vorite away, but once Fae-vorite was back and they were able to bond over this shared, I guess you can call it secret, that connection is now gone.
Yeah. After Fae-vorite shows her new pointy ears and even like as she undoes her hood, she has a crown on her head, and I'm like, maybe something a little more normal would have been a good idea, but that's just me. She admits that she was brought back to life, and she starts the whole story download. I do have a question, because this is a huge moment for Fae-vorite to be able to talk about what happened under the mountain. And yes, she is telling her blood family, but they've also never been family, with the exceptions of a few weeks last book. So I'm curious that if Fae-vorite hadn't had her initial opening up about these moments under the mountain with the bone carver, do you think she would have been able to tell her sisters this story and share the full under the mountain download? I do want to note, she does not go into detail about the last few months and what she endured at the spring court, how she moved to the night court, all that kind of stuff. She only talks about why she came here for assistance to ask about the queens. So AKA, she only goes into detail about the things she has previously opened up to and voiced to another person / possible god.
I've always assumed she kept things more factual in this retelling of what happened under the mountain, while with the bone carver, it was more emotional. But that's a really good question, and I agree with you that opening up to him and sharing those private thoughts helped her be able to talk about it more openly with her sisters here. And while I also agree that she and her sisters have never been close, she has clung to the fact that they're family, even when, to be entirely honest, they didn't deserve devotion from her. So I also think that maybe this is Fae-vorite's way of trying to bridge that familial connection and trust with them. them, especially now that she's Fae. Plus, our girl's on a mission, and being someone who needs information, sharing this information with her sisters might be her way of trying to help them understand what they're about to face, even if she's not outwardly saying that.
Nesta outright knows the request to let the queens in. And I want to take a moment to just look at this from Nesta's POV. All Nesta has ever wanted to do was protect Elaine. Elaine is now engaged to a man that she is falling in love with, and she is getting her happily ever after. Nesta, along with all of the Archerons, have grown up their entire life hearing stories of absolute horror in regards to the Fae. I mean, literally, man, bear, pig burst into her house and stole her sister away. There is not a good association with Fae being in her house. And then her sister left again for the fairies, and then she was presumed dead, and we get confirmation here that she was dead at their hands. And here is Feyre saying that she wants to bring Fae here. She wants to bring the war here. I get her outright denial to do the things that she has always held as a number one priority, specifically protecting Elaine. And this is very short-term thinking, something that is a pattern for Nesta, because Elaine comes in with the common sense. Here's a sentence I never thought I'd say. Elaine knows that if they don't help Feyre, there won't be a wedding. There will not be a happily ever after. And this is my personal favorite. Quote, Feyre gave and gave for years. Let us now help her, help others. Thank you, Elaine. I'm almost sorry I hated you so much last book.
This is where Elaine is truly showing that inner strength Feyre referenced last book. She has the ability to see the bigger picture. And I think she's a little haunted by the fact that they didn't help Feyre all those years.
This moment brings Feyre to almost happy tears. Remember last book when petty Feyre came out to play and she hoped that her family would finally realize that she was the key to their survival for all their years of poverty. It happened. Elaine here is now showing that she has opened her eyes and realized that role that Feyre played for years in keeping them alive. Proud of you, Elaine. And Nesta does agree after Elaine's major points here. And this is my favorite part of the scene. Elaine then jumps into action in sending the servants away so that they can get this show on the road. And I love seeing that Elaine is the first to step up here. Do we think that she feels guilty for everything that happened with Feyre, hunting for them for years in poverty, and she's leaping into action as a result of that guilt? Maybe. Or is this who Elaine is at her core? Is she the type of person who will jump in immediately for those in need? And instead, in those years of poverty, she was more following her older sister's lead. She saw her younger sister run off to save an entire court for the man that she loved. I wonder if that bravery that Feyre showed last book, Elaine was inspired by, or maybe even almost envious of it because she has always wanted to leap into action as well. If so, this is a side of Elaine I'm really looking forward to exploring. I also want to point out that this could also be an Elaine Asriel nod. Earlier, when Feyre meets Asriel for the first time in the House of Wind, she wonders if the Shadow Singer is always the first one to throw himself into the fray. And while sending servants away might not be the same as offering up to go to the prison in Feyre and Rhys's stead, it is a parallel between these two characters that they are the first to sacrifice themselves.
Elaine has come into her own. Nesta may be the older sister, but Elaine is the lady of the house who is loved and has a way with everyone. She sees an opportunity where they can help and wants to seize it, partly because, yes, I think this is her at her core, and those years in poverty stripped her of her feelings of competency. And now she has gained newfound confidence and strength and is taking action even when it's scary. Elaine is the optimist of the three sisters. We already knew that, but we're now seeing that when she faces danger. She recognizes there won't be a wedding if they don't help. So she wants to take the opportunity to ensure a bright future for everyone, including herself and her marriage. Like you said, I'm looking forward to exploring Elaine's character more because after she turns Fae, she loses this in herself, and we see from others' POVs over a few books how she slowly starts finding that spark of positivity again. Speaking of the wedding, that's right, folks, Elaine's engaged to a man whose father built a wall of stone around their estate that Nesta compares to a prison. Oh dear. But I gotta love how Elaine's two sisters are like, hope the father dies soon, it does show how cold and calculating Nesta is to say it, and that Fae-vorite is the other side of the coin, like she mentioned earlier in ACOTAR, when she agrees that, yeah, hopefully he does die soon. And yes, the irony that Elaine is supposed to marry and live in that prison, where Fae-vorite had just escaped her own prison with the one she was supposed to marry. A lot of readers believe that this is another nod to Elaine and Tamlin being mates, because she doesn't see it as a prison and she doesn't mind such a life. While I do definitely see that perspective, I'm sorry, I can't personally get on board with the Tamlin and Elaine are mates theory. I hope she discovers her own sense of freedom and independence that she has indeed lacked through the series. It doesn't feel like main character energy to me, which I assume she will be one of our POV characters in ACOTAR 6. As much as we were recently talking about this divide between Nesta and Feyre, I do have to point out that after Elaine leaves the room, they have as much of a heart-to-heart as these two can have. They're open and honest with each other. Feyre admits more about Tamlin, and Nesta is curious and asking questions. True, she is doing this in Nesta fashion, but still, her simply engaging in conversation is a big enough deal.
It's time to meet our Bat Boys, Archeron sisters. Feyre is taking these boys to the large dining room, which is the roomiest space in the entire house, and her chosen spot for this initial meeting. Shocking that Feyre chooses a dining room. It's like we're not there enough in these series. She shares that her father is attending a meeting in Neva in regards to the threat above the wall. We have speculated that he might have been the one to call this meeting after his glamour lifted in ACOTAR. I just want to speculate for a second. Let's just say he did not call said meeting. I can imagine that this is a meeting on the continent that not a whole lot of people are privy to. So what on earth did Papa Archeron do? A guy who was in poverty for 8 years to get an invite. Like, he is wealthy, yes, but he is also newly wealthy. Because remember, for generations, it was a debted wealth. It was not a real wealth. And he's been out of commission basically for many, many years. So there's no way that this news of his resurrected wealth has reached Neva already, which Neva is not even on our map in the book. So we assume that it is so far east that it is not even visible on the continent.
I don't know about that. Maybe, because there are other known areas on the continent that are not on the map either. So I think that it is being vague on purpose. It might be either shrouded in mystery for later books, or it's ultimately not very important to our story.
I bet.
But I tell you what, I tell you what, and you all know this if you were with us for our Empyrean coverage, the biggest pet peeve of mine when it comes to fantasy books is when locations mentioned are not on the map. What's the map for then, my friends?
Shouts to you, Isle Kingdoms.
Oh my God, the Isle Kingdoms.
So here are my thoughts. If Papa Archeron himself did not call the meeting, the Archeron family...
Which I actually don't think he did. I will say that. I don't think he did.
Here's my theory. If the Archeron family themselves were part of the Mortal Fae Alliance way back when the treaty was forged, and the seat then descended to Papa Archeron, he basically inherited his involvement. Now, we've discussed that we do not think that this is a meeting of the Mortal Fae Alliance. This is more just the Mortal Alliance because the Fae aren't really involved yet. Or theory number 2, it is known that the Archerons trade with Prythian. Now, they wouldn't know that they traded specifically with Velaris because of the secrecy that comes around the city, but as I will discuss next episode when we're in the Summer Court, I don't think it was solely just Velaris that they traded with. I do think it was more areas in Prythian. So they might know that they have a connection to Prythian, these Archerons. So because of that, he is a bridge that could then create this mortal alliance into a mortal Fae alliance because he's in with the good Prythians. But I do wonder, all of this to be put to rest, if the Archeron family is important enough to be at this meeting, I wonder if Feyre, in their letter to the queens, if she mentioned that she is an Archeron, and that is one of the reasons that the queens eventually agreed, because the Archeron family name apparently has some sway.
We know that Papa Archeron inherited the title Prince of Merchants, and it was passed down generation after generation, with their debt accruing 3 generations ago. Now, no one else knew that they were in debt, only the actual Archeron family. So this title, the Prince of Merchants, could have been coined during the Mortal Fae Alliance and continually passed down, like you mentioned. And their family was connected with Prythian afterward with trade. And while Papa Archeron never personally worked with Prythian because of Amarantha's reign, he knew of it. Again, not a Velaris specifically because of its spells, but like you said, there's other workarounds there. And that is why he had a seat at the summit as an esteemed family name with connections to Prythian. So essentially, both of your theories could have weight to them. But there's also the question of if the summit was a threat against Prythian or specifically Highburn, because I think it was technically both, was ruling over Prythian, and the mortals knew that there was a bigger danger brewing. However, the mortal queens did not want to protect the mortal realm in Prythian. So I think that they were not aware or care about the Archeron family and any of their personal connections. And he was just one of many at the summit where the queens knew about it and the dangers, but not him specifically being there.
Finally, our Bat Boys get introduced to Elaine and Nesta Archeron. This is the first time that we as readers learn Feyre's last name, which is wild considering that we are in chapter 24 of book 2. Quote, I had not thought of my family name, had not used it for years and years, because even when I had sacrificed and hunted for them, I had not wanted my father's name, not when he sat by that little fire and let us starve. This will surprise no one, but I looked up the meaning of the last name Archeron and where it came from. The Archeron is actually a real river in Greece, but it was used in Greek mythology as the River of Woe, aka one of the 5 river entrances to hell / the underworld. Not at all ominous. And now, do I think that that has anything to do with our story? Probably not. Honestly, Archeron's just a pretty dope last name, I think, but it's just interesting thinking about it in terms of Greek mythology, which we know Sarah J. Maas is a fan of. As the 3 males are introduced, it is unsurprising that Rhys's wings are gone, along with his Illyrian fighting leathers, and he's replaced them all with his fine black jacket and pants. So this is a very quick wing watch because I say it's unsurprisingly because, as we noted, whenever Rhys's wings are nowhere to be seen, it typically means that he's putting on a front or a mask, versus when his wings are out, it means that he's truly being himself, aka he's putting on a mask here in this situation. Let's take a moment and look at the scene from Rhys's point of view. He might not be the terrifying High Lord of the Night Court. He has definitely put a damper on his power, but he is not a fan of these 2 sisters, and he will later admit to Feyre that he barely even got through this evening with them. He is still pissed as hell at them for how they treated their youngest sister for all their years of poverty. Think about it like when you have a best friend or a partner and they've told you about someone from their past who wronged them in some sort of way. Normally, in solidarity, not everyone, some people are, cool-headed, but me, in solidarity, I dislike them with a fiery passion, or at least have some kind of negative perception around them. Like, for instance, if anyone wrongs my sister, you're dead to me.
Nicole hates every single one of my exes, even if I'm on good terms with them now.
True. You know what? I love you, and you wouldn't have me any other way.
I know. That's exactly right. You're so protective, and I love it.
Don't fuck with my big sister. Feyre, however, has not been bad-mouthing her sisters, just like Lexi has not been bad-mouthing her ex-boyfriends. I just hate them with a fiery passion and pure solidarity. But she has not been singing her sister's praises either.
Well, and he saw what Feyre did to fight for those she loves under the mountain and feels she deserves more than she's been given by those she loves. Like Elaine says, she gives and gives, but Feyre hasn't gotten the love and support she deserves back. Rhys, as such a protective and somewhat selfless individual, cannot fathom that her sisters didn't help her and let their little sister just go off into the woods. Oh geez, I'm starting to get fired up too, Rhys. Like, pull back.
Well, later at dinner, Rhys is going to be pretty silent throughout the meal, which is very much unlike Rhys and High Lord of the Night Court. We will later learn this is because it really hit him how young she was when her sisters just let her go out into the woods, and how he does not have warm and fuzzy feelings towards them as a result. And then it is not helped at all by Nesta verbally attacking his mate at the dinner table. His anger, in my opinion, is incredibly fair. If I saw someone, I'm getting on my defensive high horse, if I saw someone treating my husband this way at dinner, even if we were just, dating in that stage, or even just friends in that stage, I would not be as silent as Rhys is, I'll say that. As they sit down, you guessed it, in the dining room for dinner, Nesta takes a seat at the head of the table, quote, a queen ready to hold court.
This immediately is a major tone shift from our family dinner just a few chapters ago where no one was sitting at the head of the table. But there's also that queen ready to hold court language.
We've highlighted every morsel of the queen language around Nesta, and we will continue to do so, especially in our lead up to Silver Flames. But it's little lines like this that are the foundation to both the Nesta will end up as a high lady of a court theory and Nesta will end up as high queen of motherfucking Prithian as a whole by the end of the series theory. But we will cover those on another day.
This is a subtly big scene where the two Archeron sisters first meet and interact with the Bat Boys. Elaine, to her credit, doesn't faint, and Nesta, to her credit, doesn't hiss at them. Yet. And within pages, we start to see the dynamic that sets the stage for these six. Elaine is polite, in stark contrast to Nesta's coldness by saying, nice to meet you, although she's trembling. Like Nicole said, Nesta sits at the head of the table to show her dominance. Azrael faintly smiles, seeing Elaine white-knuckling her fork because he wishes it was his cock. I mean, because he notices how scared she is and she's trying to hide it. And the two of them will be... And the two of them will be the most civil of all of them because they're trying to keep the calm among all of these hotheads.
I love that when Rhys and Feyre meet and when Cassian and Nesta meet, aka two sets of mates, the stark comparison to when Azrael and Elaine meet, two people who are not mates, is Azrael and Elaine have the kindest first interaction of any of them.
Well, and then Cassian finds his next opponent in Nesta, which, yes, we will get to shortly because, oh my God, this on a reread is so much fun and I'm just obsessed with all of it. And Rhys, to his credit, is trying to keep Feyre from bursting into a ball of fire while trying to keep his own composure. That's definitely on brand for him too. These Archeron sisters are very skeptical about the Bat Boys, and hey, we get it. But if you're skeptical about custom beauty because your feed is flooded with customize this and personalize that, all promising to fix my frizzy Hermione Granger hair, then you have to try Prose. Because when Prose says custom, they actually mean it.
Each and every bottle of Prose custom hair and skincare is made to order and personalized with a unique blend of naturally powerful and proven effective ingredients to meet your needs. Their in-depth consultation analyzes over 80 factors for a complete view of your life and your beauty goals.
And seriously, they get personal. They even asked me about my stress levels, about where I live, because hey, if you're familiar with Colorado, the dryness here really does impact your hair, and they actually took that into account when they were creating my customized products.
Next, they recommend a full routine of truly personalized products. Since I switched to Prose, I've noticed that my hair, which normally is like tangles galore, even when I don't do anything, I brush it and I don't do anything, I don't touch it, it tangles like crazy. It is now smoother and silkier than ever. I can brush it like straight through out of the shower. I almost cried the first time I did it. I was so happy. But you don't have to just take our word for it. In a third-party, double-blind, dermatologist-supervised control clinical study, aka the gold standard in research studies, Prose proved that personalization works better than off-the-shelf alternatives.
Prose is so confident that you'll love your results that they're offering our listeners an exclusive trial offer, so you too can see the difference custom care can make. 50% off your first subscription order at prose.com/fantasyfangirls. That's prose.com/fantasyfangirls for your free consultation and 50% off your one-of-a-kind formulas. Prose.com/fantasyfangirls.
When our crew begins eating their food, it's poached salmon, whipped potatoes, my freaking favorite, roasted chicken with beets and turnips, and an egg game meat casserole, aka it is, quote, seasonal food, whatever they had left at the end of the winter. Nesta starts to notice that her sister is grimacing while eating the food because it tastes like ash in her mouth. It sounds like Papa Archeron needs to share some of those Velaris spices that he's been trading, but whatever. And Nesta, in noticing Feyre's reaction, she starts to be petty and hostile. Back at the beginning of ACOTAR, we noted that Nesta is quite a bully of an older sister to Feyre. And while these two sisters have found some common ground and a truce last book like we discussed earlier, we immediately know that is not only gone now, but now it is just right back to old times, which I want to speculate, what the fuck changed? Is it because Fae-vorite is Fae now? Is it because this is just the default and Nesta's going back to it? Is it because Nesta feels like she needs to play a certain role right now in order to protect Elaine? Is it because she feels that Fae-vorite has a sense of superiority with her being high Fae now and Nesta hates feeling less than? Is it all of the above?
To answer your question, I want to pull out a quote from Silver Flames because Nesta thinks something to herself that I think is important to share in this moment. Thinking of when her family was in poverty and no one came to save the Archeron family, quote, "So Nesta had become a wolf, armed herself with invisible teeth and claws and learned to strike faster, deeper, more lethally, had relished it. But when the time came to put the wolf away, she'd found it had devoured her too." Also, real quickly, I love that parallel language with her thinking of herself as a wolf, as that being Feyre's montage for herself too when she needs that inner strength. But also, another note here on Nesta's, I don't want to say behavior, but just her personality. Shar on TikTok has a fantastic Nesta analysis. Well, I'll definitely reference this TikTok when we get to Silver Flames. It is so good. I highly recommend listening to it. The link is in the show notes. Moving on, Nesta and Feyre's truce in ACOTAR, it wasn't necessarily a healing journey between them, in my personal opinion. It was more so a truce, and I don't think it was deep or strong enough to erase their strained relationship or stop Nesta from being who she is before she goes on her own inner healing journey. This right now is who Nesta is at her core. So to answer your question, yes, I think this is who Nesta is, that she is being protective, that she is prejudiced, that she feels out of control in this situation, and her way of regaining control and being powerful is with her scornful words, because that is where her power lies, in her words and how she just spews that hate.
Well, Fae-vorite does not take this laying down. She retorts back with the perfect quote, "I can eat, drink, fuck, and fight just as well as I did before. Better even. Go, Fae-vorite."
That line right there deserves a huzzah!
Let's shift our attention away from these two sisters just for a moment and move towards Nesta and Cassian's interactions. Let's freaking do this. After meeting Nesta, Cassian grimaces on his way to the dining room. We will learn that in Silver Flames, when he met Nesta, he guessed that they were mates. The guessed word there is very important. He didn't know, but he guessed. I love this reaction is grimacing at her hostile nature, which, obviously he's like, oh God, what did we just get ourselves into? But there's also this element of, oh God, what did I just get myself into?
Oh, I have so much to talk about with them in a few moments.
Oh, I'm so excited. Sarah J. Maas has admitted that she originally was planning on making Nesta and Lucian mates, but quickly realized that Nesta would eat Lucian alive. In writing this scene, she realized that there was tension between Nesta and Cassian. I feel like I saw in an interview somewhere that she realized that this was a moment where they would be mates, but I could not find that interview, so I'm not going to say that's canon. But after Nesta's hostile nature towards Fae-vorite, Cassian is staring at her as if sizing up a new, interesting opponent. I love that language for our Lord of Bloodshed. Of course, that would be his mate, a new, interesting opponent.
But Cassian is also seeing someone attack his friend and the girl his brother is crushing on. So when Nesta asks, "What are you looking at?" to Cassian, Cassian answers, quote, "Someone who let her youngest sister risk her life every day in the woods while she did nothing. Someone who let a 14-year-old child go out into that forest so close to the wall." Whew, but he does not stop there. "Your sister died to save my people. She is willing to do so again to protect you from war. So don't expect me to sit here with my mouth shut while you sneer at her for a choice she did not get to make and insult my people in the process." Whew, I just got goosebumps. And Nesta doesn't respond to him, instead turning away, dismissing him.
Well, only after checking out his body.
Oh, really? I didn't catch.
Oh, yeah. She stares at him. She looks him up and down and then turns away, which in my opinion means looking at his body. Really quickly, there is this moment in Silver Flames where Nesta will pull this moment after Cassian's like, "I've been in love with you," or "I've been attracted to you since the first time I saw you." And she's like, "I don't know about that, because remember what you said to me? It still haunts me." But I do remember reading this scene for the first time and being like, wait, because it's not at all romantic in any way, but there is definitely alluding to that sexual tension between Nesta and Cassian.
Well, like we've been saying, Cassian really has met his match in Nesta. And while I understand some readers feel he deserves better than Nesta, I personally love how well they work together eventually. She is fire for him, and he can match it and stroke the fire. But he also has the biggest heart, and he is arguably the most empathetic character in this series. And he will eventually soften those hard edges of Nesta's and immensely help her in the only way she can be helped. He is both insulted by her as she gets under his skin and intrigued by her. He's a hothead, and he needs that steel coolness to balance him out. And while that romance between them will truly come out in ACOWAR, then shut down and then really blossom in Silver Flames, that's not how their story is. They aren't Fae-vorite and Rhysand, because that's so not either of them. They're both warriors in their own rights, and they need to battle each other and find the other worthy before they can come together. That's the tension we're seeing here, along with Cassian watching every bob of Nesta's throat as she swallows. I mean, come on, need I say more? Like, yeah.
She'll be doing a different kind of swallowing in
yeah!
a dining room later on.
Oh my God, we are going to be absolutely unhinged in Silver Flames. He knows how to push her buttons, and he's not afraid to do it. He stands up to her when few others do. And yeah, Nesta really does need to be put in her place by a challenger. He's both baiting the wolf in her and petting it in only a way that Cassian can. I need to stop talking about these two. The sex jokes are just everywhere. Shouts to you, Cassian, for defending Fae-vorite. Their budding friendship, it's so sweet, and I just love how he sticks up for her against Nesta.
When did we switch places?
I mean, the puns are always there for me. Like, never forget giant hanging balls.
Now, before Lexi starts panting into the microphone, we have to shift our attention to another soon-to-be budding romance at the table, which is Elaine and Asriel. We do not have a book devoted to their romance yet, but we do have small glimpses into their attraction, plus a bonus chapter with some serious sexual tension, which, Lexi, have you finally fucking read?
Yeah. Okay. So real quick. So I had like kind of skimmed it, and like I had like read like certain parts of it. And then it wasn't until fairly recently that I sat down and like really read the whole thing, like with my full attention. And oh my God, that's all I have to say is, oh my God. If you have not read the bonus chapter for Asriel from Silver Flames, you need to read it right now. We'll put it in the show notes, and then you have to read the bonus chapter because it is going to blow your mind.
It is much more graphic than I thought it was going to be. It was like,
yeah.
Now, Elaine and Asriel are definitely getting along the best of anyone at this table. Let's just be fair. I also love seeing this tie between these two. Earlier, Fae-vorite says about Elaine, quote, "My sister can convince anyone to do anything with a few smiles." And here she says, quote, "I wonder if Rhys's spy master often got his information through stone cold manners as much as stealth and shadows." There are so many, I'll say, really in the weeds parallels between Elaine and Asriel. It's not as aggressive in your face as Rhysand and Fae-vorite, but also we are in Fae-vorite's point of view. So of course it's going to be more stark versus here a little bit more back burner. These core parallels between Asriel and Elaine are something that I'm really looking forward to tracking throughout this deep dive, specifically in ACOWAR. I'm really excited to see these a lot more than I have on my previous reads. But guess who continues to show some self-awareness? It is absolutely Elaine. Quote, "And as for Fae-vorite's hunting during those years, it is not Nesta's neglect alone that is to blame. We were scared. We had received no training and everything had been taken and we'd failed her. Both of us." Am I becoming an Elaine stan? Like, I might be.
Yeah, she really has come into her own, and I'm really seeing it a lot more here on the deep dive. Also, I'm paying more attention to Elaine fans who share why they like her, specifically on social media. Especially shout out to our listener, the Bookish Biologist, who makes some very good Elaine arguments, and I really respect how she shares her Elaine insights and support.
Yes, I love seeing the reason why people love Elaine, and also the reasons why people think Elaine and Asriel are endgame. I'm really not in the Asriel-Elaine camp yet, but I've been really enjoying seeing these parallels between these two characters in a way that going into ACOTAR 6, if they end up being endgame, I'm going to feel really at peace with it. Like, that's how I'm going to feel. And that's, I think, what we can all hope for the best as readers, is going in with zero expectations and feeling at peace with our characters getting their happily ever afters.
I agree.
Hopefully.
But whatever the end game is, I just want everyone to have a happily ever after. Yeah. We've been on the record very clear saying that. Do I think that they are end game? I don't think so. but I think that it is going to be a very interesting journey.
Yeah, agreed.
To whatever end.
Conversation moves to talk about the terms high fae versus the term lesser fairies. And this is where Rhys speaks his first words in the dining room. My guess is it's because he did not trust himself to be nice, so he opted to say nothing at all and instead let Feyre fight this battle with her sisters. We've discussed in previous episodes, both in this series and in our Empyrean coverage, the difference between a partner standing at someone's side versus standing behind them versus standing in front of them. And right now, metaphorically, Rhys is standing behind Feyre. He's letting her fight her own battle with her sister right now, rather than stepping in and feeling like he needs to be the protector and fight for her.
I agree. As well as he's watching this dynamic with his brothers and seeing how they are in this unique situation. I think that both of the brothers passed the test, with Cassian defending Feyre and Azriel keeping the peace.
When Nesta asks what they call Feyre, since she was not born a high fae, Rhys says, quote, "Feyre is whoever she chooses to be." It is my obligation to highlight yet again the theme of this book, choice.
And at this time, Feyre doesn't know who she chooses to be. That's what she's doing this whole book, learning who she is, where she belongs, and having the confidence to then choose, which is why I personally think it is ultimately fitting that she becomes High Lady by the end of this book, as rushed as it may seem. I do agree with that, because it does instill with such impact that she has figured out exactly who she chooses to be, and who she chooses to be is the High Lady of the Night Court. But we will get to that eventually. Even after this dinner and the tension between Nesta and Feyre, Feyre agrees to stay the night because, quote, "too soon, perhaps the world would go to hell." Despite everything, Feyre wants to spend time with her sisters and be in their presence. She knows they might not have much time left, and she wants to take advantage of it. But I'll also argue that by Nesta saying she assumes they want to spend the night, it's her way of inviting them too. Otherwise, she would have no problem kicking them to the curb. This is Nesta, remember. It's her cold way of opening up to them by letting these fae she didn't want near the house hours ago to stay the night. Love, love, love also how Elaine beams at this. Yay, my sister's gonna have a sleepover. But then I can't help but go, "Aw," when she murmurs they don't have what Rhys requests, which is 2 rooms with 2 beds next to each other.
Like, I love Rhys, but he's kind of an asshat to Elaine in this moment, when Elaine is one who's showing a lot of kindness and a lot of self-reflection. Whereas if I was in Rhys-Ann's shoes, and yes, I did go into this meeting being like, fuck you, sisters, like you did my mate dirty. But then I saw Elaine open up in this way, I would soften a lot. However, Rhys does not. And him being kind of an ass to her was a little bit like, Elaine is trying, my guy. Can you just be nice?
Yes. He's about to take some real L's here, too.
Oh, God, yeah. I love you, Rhys. We say goodbye to the dining room for now because our crew takes a long time to write a letter to the queens that is, quote, impressive, welcoming, and threatening enough. I really want to know what this letter said and how they wrote it to make it come off like this, because, oh my God, how I wish that I knew how to use this kind of language, like in my writing of, corporate emails for my old day job, like per my previous email, like just didn't cut it sometimes. So I wish I knew what this said.
That's why I write more business emails.
Oh, yeah, you write all the business emails.
I see. That's so funny because I'm here being like itching to like help write this letter, because I would be really good at helping make it impressive, welcoming, and threatening enough. I call them my business bitch emails.
Meanwhile, I would be like, can we add an exclamation point there? I don't do corporate. Thank God we're a team.
Side note, I'd also like to praise Nesta and Elaine for washing the dishes. I don't think we get confirmation whether they did or did not do this at the cottage all those years of poverty. And if they did, then sure, they helped a little. But that does not excuse their overall uselessness for those 8 years. I see that there being a partner, aka Feyre, who is the sole breadwinner, manages their entire lives, does 99% of everything around the house, and then the other partner takes out the trash and claims they're useful in this life that they live together. But right here, these two sisters probably haven't cleaned a dish in at least a year with all of these servants and their respective roles as ladies of the house. And they're taking that on while the others work, presumably without complaint. So good job helping with chores, Archeron sisters.
Side note, Lex, are you a fan of dishes, or is that
No.
like the chore that you hate? What's your most hated chore?
That I do, or just in general?
Just in general.
I don't take out the trash.
Me neither.
I don't think I've taken out the trash in years. I love cooking. I plug in my earbuds, and like that's the time where my husband, he's off of work, so he takes the kids. I get a nice break from them, and I love doing the cooking there. And then we eat, and then my husband will then do the dishes. That's kind of our usual routine there. So
awesome. I am also a big fan of cooking, and Brett is a huge fan of laundry and taking out the trash. And I'm like, wonderful. Those are my two least favorite chores. So it's like all of his least favorite chores are my favorite chores and vice versa. So it works out very nicely.
Both of you also hate vacuuming so much that you got one of those Roombas, which I just think is hilarious. I don't mind vacuuming at all, which is good.
I was like,
because we have to vacuum a lot.
I was like, can we outsource vacuuming? And he was like, you mean to a robot? And I said, sold. Although our Roomba did die and we did get a like power vacuum. And now that I like just plug in a book and I like turn it up real loud, probably to the detriment of my ears, I don't mind vacuuming as much, but it's still not my favorite chore. I did like it a lot when our Roomba, whose name was Roscoe, did all the vacuuming for me.
Our Roomba's name is Karen. Oh, Karen.
I don't have to think too hard about why. That's so funny. Oh my God. Fae-vorite and Rhys walk into their shared room for the night while Cassian and Azriel sleep in the other. Which, side note, I'm assuming that both of these rooms have only one bed. So in my headcanon, Azriel and Cassian are, at least if it was Cassian's way, they're cuddling. And I'm assuming that Cassian and Azriel are also just in there calling dibs on Archeron sisters.
Oh, really? See, I feel like it's more as poking fun looking at Cassian about Nesta and Cassian being all like, no way, bro. I hate her, bro. I truly would love to be a fly on the wall, whatever they're saying.
One of my favorite parts of Silver Flames is just the soul, like Cassian and Azriel scenes. And I just want more of them. Like they are so fun and I adore them so much. Rhys and Feyre walk into their room and there's only one bed. When I tell you, my pulse jumped up an alarming number of beats when I read this for the first time. I was so giddy, but then my giddiness was immediately crushed by a plunk on the floor with a bed appearing out of Rhys's pocket room of requirement. As Rhys begins getting ready for bed, he sarcastically says how Nesta is a delight, by the way. This is only just the beginning of these two, their distaste for each other, we'll call it. And this is mostly because they are two very similar people, Rhys and Nesta. They're both fiercely protective over those that they love. They both have a very regal energy around them. They're both consistently putting on metaphorical masks for others. And this is just the beginning of priming us for their bumping heads in a court of silver flames. Rhys goes on to mention how she gets under Cassian's skin and how Elaine should not be marrying this Lord's son. I love this moment, how similar Rhys and Feyre are. Again, it is very in our face. Feyre is nosy with the Inner Circle's melodrama, which is exactly what Rhys is doing here with the Archeron sisters, which Feyre even points out, mentioning how Azriel is in love with more on this later, and how Cassian is the buffer between the two of them. Which, side note, how much do we think Rhys knows about all of this melodrama? I'm assuming everything.
I assume yes, but he chooses to stay out of it. Though I think this is actually a low blow from Feyre, and I will be talking about this more later too. I have feelings about how she approaches the more Cassian Azriel situation. Let's just say Feyre is certainly a busybody gossip, and she uses this bit of knowledge, I'll call it, against them. I didn't think Rhys was mocking her sister, actually, but pointing out concern that she shouldn't be marrying this guy, whereas Feyre goes in with something extremely touchy with his inner circle. I don't know. I won't call it an L for Feyre, but it's not my favorite moment or pattern of hers and how she uses these observations against the others to defend herself.
It's the three-dimensionalness of Feyre. Like, if we loved every single little thing about her, she was faultless, she was perfect, this would not be as interesting of a story as it is. I love that there's things that the busybody gossip in her that are, quite frankly, not a favorite. They're kind of annoying. Like, I like those elements to characters when they are that very three-dimensional because it makes them real. It makes them not like this like cookie cutter perfect thing. As Fae-vorite is coming out of the bathroom wearing her night clothes, which she did not bring, and Rhys like summons again from his room of requirement, along with some lacy under things. And I just love their flirting. It's so good. She gets into bed and feels that the sheets are warm, and she thanks Rhys for warming the sheets for her. Quote, Amarantha never once thanked me for that. Rhys is continuing to get vulnerable with Feyre, opening up about things that happen under the mountain that only Feyre could understand, and that he doesn't know if he can share with his family due to their feelings about that 50-year separation.
Plus, these two are connecting over that shared trauma. How Amarantha, she didn't suffer enough, which I agree.
Yep.
I absolutely agree. And that brief connection may be what brings Rhys to share how he could barely get through this dinner and how Elaine means well. But, quote, seeing them sitting at that table, I hadn't realized it would hit me as strongly. How young you were, how they didn't protect you.
Rhys did have a sister who he fiercely loved, and he now has a family who he would do literally anything for, including whoring himself out to someone he hates for 50 years. The idea that these two older sisters didn't do that for Feyre, didn't do anything they could to protect them, even didn't do a half of a thought of what they could to protect Feyre. Quote, it'll be a long time yet before I can look at your sisters without wanting to roar at them. Later in this book, Rhys will find that forgiveness feels a little bit too big of a stretch, but I'm going to use it for lack of a better term, and will offer the Archeron sisters immense kindness and protection after the queens basically tell them that, sorry, y'all, you're fucked.
I think forgiveness is too strong of a word, but I do think he's able to move past it given the situation and because he always wants to protect. That's just isn't his nature. And then he has to help take care of Elaine when she breaks after turning Fae. But Nesta, I don't think he truly forgives her until she saves Feyre and their baby. Yeah. Despite how they will continue to butt heads, but that's more because of their personalities versus what Nesta did to Feyre or didn't do when they were in poverty.
Definitely. Feyre then brings up a good point, though. If they didn't let her go into the woods alone, Prythian would still be enslaved to Amarantha, and their family might very well either be dead or about to be dead from Amarantha marching on the human lands. This is destiny/fate at full display, and we love to see it in the fantasy novels.
I love it so much. The butterfly effect at its finest. So many of us have that difficult challenge from our past, but if we didn't go through it, we wouldn't be where or who we are today. And that's something that we can all really and truly relate to.
Definitely. Rhys lets her know that the title of Human Lands Emissary of the Night Court comes with a salary. Ayo! And Feyre's first reaction is, you don't have to do that. Feyre's money mindset is still very much of that when she was poor. In A Court of Frost and Starlight, she will have a hard time purchasing anything that she hasn't deemed absolutely vital. And she hasn't quite adjusted to the idea of being able to afford anything at the drop of a hat versus Elaine, who adjusts nicely, being the older sister and much more used to having wealth, growing up much more with it.
Well, and then even Elaine understands why Feyre feels that way, though, even though she is more comfortable spending money. Take last year's ball in Feyre's honor, for example, or when they were poor and she would spend money along with Nesta.
Starting to like Elaine, don't fuck it up. But Feyre is making the same amount as the others in the inner circle. So I guess that there's no, you've been with the company for, 200 or 300 years, and here's a pay raise. Like, they all just have executive salaries from the get-go. I feel like they would have a very high rating on Glassdoor.
Poor HR, though. Can you imagine the headache that HR would have to deal with every single day? I like to think that Amren would be running HR.
Okay, but who's Lisa from marketing? That's my question.
Alice! Yeah, always got to make it Alice. No, if we're talking about Inner Circle, more. She's the good onboarding person.
Yeah,
she welcomes them with open arms, and it's like, okay, here's all of this. Oh, and by the way, here's the tea.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Cassian is the head of sales who takes you out and gets you fucked up at night one time at the happy hour. And then Azriel's the head of IT who you just never see unless there's a problem.
But he also still runs everything and makes sure it's going.
Oh my God. Rhys, king of segues, though, asks Feyre when her birthday is. And the winter solstice. It's the longest night of the year. This is one of those moments on a reread where you're like, oh my god, like you get chills, you freak out. Even Rhys has to ask twice to confirm that he heard her right. Can you only imagine what is going through his head right now? He's probably thinking, fucking mate fate, are you kidding me right now? Like, shove it in my face, why don't you?
Also, just have to love how he notes that she didn't celebrate it. Feyre didn't want to. She doesn't find birthdays important. Clearly, she's not a birthday girl like we are in our family. We definitely take after our dad, where it's like the full week is my birthday, okay? Feyre hasn't felt alive since leaving Under the Mountain, and she certainly didn't want the support or dedication to her or want even more attention. It's like celebrating her birthday is literally the opposite of what she wanted back in the spring court. It's such a big contrast from the birthday love and celebration she will receive in Frost and Starlight, once again illustrating how much she comes alive in the night court on this healing journey.
Feyre is also the kind of person who does not like being in the spotlight or the center of attention, let alone celebrated. This is absolutely exacerbated in her time in the spring court, given her trauma from Under the Mountain and her new title as Cursebreaker. But she continues not being the number one pusher of her birthday, even when she's surrounded by her own family in the night court and many much birthday cakes. I do have to say this. I think that for Feyre's birthday, homegirl needs a summer vacation. And we're coming up on those summer months, which means a lot more time outside, feeling the sun on our face. But with those higher temperatures, hydration becomes even more important. But healthy hydration is not just about drinking water, folks. It's about water and electrolytes. You lose both water and sodium when you sweat. It makes sense. Both need to be replaced in order to prevent muscle cramps, headaches, energy dips, and so much more. But most people only replace the water.
The solution obviously isn't to stop drinking water, though. It's to drink water plus electrolytes. Enter Element. Element is an electrolyte solution that has enough sodium, potassium, and magnesium to get you feeling and performing your best. Plus, my favorite part is that it has zero sugar, artificial flavors, or other dodgy ingredients to hold you back.
I'm blown away by the amount of element flavors. Personally, I'm drinking the mango chili. Mango chili is powering me through this 5-hour recording today. And honestly, I love drinking my morning element, especially as I get more into my cycling workouts. I've started doing that. It's the only reason I feel normal by the end of the day.
Watermelon salt got us through my moving day when you all helped us then. Yep.
Oh my God. I'm pretty sure that revived me for phase 3 of the moving day as I put up your baby gate. But my favorite part of Element is that there is truly a flavor for everyone, and you are guaranteed to find a flavor that you love.
Element came up with a fantastic offer for us. Just go to drinklmnt.com/FFG to get a free sample pack with any purchase. Thank you so much, Element.
It is time for some magic training in the mortal realm, and we're kicking it off with the Wing Watch. Despite being in the mortal realm, Rhys does have his wings out and his Illyrian garb on. This is just him and Feyre in the woods, and it is showcasing us that he is back to being fully 100% himself.
We haven't been talking about Tamlin much because we're waiting for the big moment during training, but we are getting so many little Tamlin mentions as Feyre begins to mentally break away from him emotionally and identify what she was in the spring court, while still feeling all the feelings of pushing back against that weight in her chest and her gut. It makes this feeling so realistic about a breakup, as fast and curvebally as it might seem to readers who are so bought into book 1. We experience these emotions with her now as she's finally shown a detailed map of the night court, when Rhys can now trust her. And it's not said on the page, but I think there's true guilt here, paralleling to when Feyre felt that little bit of guilt back when she was indeed sharing all the details with Lucien and Tamlin, when she was, quote, little more than a spy and prisoner. Oof. Rhys gives her the assignment of lighting a candle, dousing it with water, and then drying the wick, of course, all without her hands. All of which Feyre immediately claims she doesn't know how to do, defaulting back to her I can't attitude when it comes to her powers. But remember, she has used her fire powers before, handprints on the table in the spring court, and she's created a wall of wind to protect herself against Tamlin's outburst, and one of the elements she used was indeed water when she got locked up in the spring court. What's the common denominator? She was in a high emotional state. So now it's all about controlling these powers and learning how to draw upon them on command, which is definitely outside of her comfort zone. She tells Rhys to go so she can concentrate, but this also goes back to why she didn't want him to see her when she was trying to learn how to read. She doesn't like trying and failing in front of him.
Feyre kicks him, however, out of her training session, and he tells her to give a shout down the bond when she accomplishes her homework. It cannot be overstated how much I love the moment where she says, what? Like literally shout at the tattoo. And he says, quote, you could try rubbing it on certain body parts and I might come faster.
Come faster.
Yeah, those last two words are not an accident there. Feral. I am feral right now for this man. Oh my God.
And although her outward reaction is to be mad at him, after he leaves and she replays his words in her mind, a quiet chuckle rasps out of her. She's slowly, ever so slowly, finding that spark within herself again.
However, hours pass of Feyre's solo practice and nothing. Feyre even wonders if she should have tested out the Illyrian bow and arrows before asking Rhys to leave. Not only is this such a fun parallel because she is in her woods where she used to hunt, but also because she says she hasn't shot anything in months and that's the reason why she wants to. However, I think that it's actually because she wants to do something she knows how to do again. It's like those moments where you have to be a beginner at something for X, Y, or Z reasons, or you just pick up a hobby and you're like, this looks fun. But then you're like, oh, being a beginner sucks and I hate not being good at things. And all you want to do is go back to a task or a hobby or whatever of something that you're actually good at so you can feel better about yourself as a human being. Maybe that's just me.
Nope, definitely not just you. It is all of us, all of us.
But then a note and a pen appears in her pack, and the Prithian texting officially enters the chat with a quote, I'm bored. Any sparks yet? If that's not the most text message thing I've ever read in a book, I don't know what it is. But I love this because it's yet another reason why Feyre's writing lessons from earlier in the series has paid off. Rhysand even compliments her handwriting, which, pause, I need to know what Feyre's handwriting regimen was to go from literally not being able to write to like beautiful, like handwritten, because my handwriting could use that training.
I love you, and I respectfully agree.
Listen, some of us were not handwriting cursive notes to our boyfriends in middle school, and it just stuck, and now we have this gorgeous cursive Jane Austen level handwriting.
It was high school, but sure.
I'm so sorry to insult your journey.
You gotta give it to Rhys. He is so smooth as he finds his little ends with Feyre. And again, we see her coming more to life as she pokes fun at him and giving a faint smile at his compliment. I can also only imagine what Cassian and Nesta getting into it again over their tea entails. He's just pushing her buttons and I love it.
But distracted, Feyre does not notice the other creature entering the forest until a hand covers her mouth and an arm moves around her. And, quote, stop or I'll snap your neck. Welcome back to the chat, Adder Bartok. Which, side note, snap your neck is incredibly rude because that's how she died.
Dang, I didn't even put that together. You're so right. It is safe to say I don't think he cares about manners. But when I first read this, I was like, oh, because up to this point in the story, we haven't had an evil villain. Indeed, the villain has been Tamlin, though in an entirely different way. Oh, and I suppose the Weaver, I kind of forgot about her. She did try to kill Feyre as well. I don't know about you, but I was waiting for the Adder to make another appearance after he mysteriously disappeared after Amarantha's death. While this scene might not last long, it's a jolt to us readers that, hey, shit's getting real. Of course, we've had the King of Hybern, who's been mentioned multiple times on the page, or the plot has really come together.
It's a redirection of focus for us as readers because we've been so in on Feyre's depression and her healing journey that this is a reminder of, oh, that's right. This trilogy, it's got a big bad and it's the King of Hybern. The Adder's evilness does not last very long though, because he says to Feyre, quote, now tell me, and the night explodes around them. The interruptions. They're back. Because tell him, what did he, like, he does not know why the King of Hybern wants Feyre. So the only logical thing I can think here is, now tell me where the High Lord of the Night Court is. But we will never know because Rhys is standing there with his hands in his pockets and we're back at Wing Watch because he's back in his jacket and pants and it doesn't say so, but we can assume that his wings are also gone.
I don't think he ever let the Adder see his wings anyway. He never showed them under the mountain. Like, nobody really knows outside of Velaris that he has wings.
Yeah. Correct.
I love seeing Rhys in such a powerful position with the Adder right now. After 50 years of being tied to Amarantha and his power is mostly gone. Now Rhys is in his element and the Adder is nothing compared to him and his abilities. When before, they were kind of like colleagues. And you can tell Rhys is savoring this ability to face the Adder at his fully powerful self. Hands in his pockets as he binds the Adder with his twisting bands of night and spears his wings and speaking calmly, almost bored to him like the Adder is nothing, absolutely nothing to him.
Speculation time. How did Rhys know that the Adder was there? We learned after the Adder leaves that Rhys knew, or at least was curious about, who was going to attempt to take Fae-vorite the second she was out and about for the first time. So did he know that the Adder showed up because of the blast of terror when he grabbed her and Rhys immediately winnowed over there? Was he nearby and like watching and just lying about being near Cassian and Nesta? Personally, I doubt that. Did he have some kind of like enemy tripwire alarm set up around Fae-vorite that I could see Rhys doing?
That's what I think. If I had to speculate, I think that's what it would be. I always assumed that Rhys figured Hybern would be particularly interested in Fae-vorite after she was remade, and there would of course be a target on her back. Maybe Azriel also heard whispers that Hybern had a target on Fae-vorite, but Rhys does say later on that he's curious who wanted to snatch her, so he could very well be expecting one of the other courts in case they had heard about her powers, or even the Spring Court, which they will also try to snatch her. Basically, he knows that Fae-vorite is a hot commodity and wants to see who's actively hunting her. Like, for instance, I don't think he would have been relying solely on that blast of terror.
Well, okay, my second question is, how did the Adder know where Fae-vorite was? Is it because Rhys used his powers and was winnowing around the place and like passing notes? But personally, I don't think they have a tracker on Rhys's magic yet. So how did the Adder, or I guess it's really how did the King of Hybern know where Fae-vorite was and thus sent the Adder after her? I have so many questions.
You're right, because I don't think the king has started tracking Rhys and his power yet, because he will use his power a lot before they're attacked in the Hewn City, which is when we do know that he is starting to get tracked. I wonder if Hybern has put spies near Fae-vorite's sister's house and saw them arrive. Remember, Ianthe knows exactly who they are and where they live, and she is already working with the King of Hybern. Tamlin himself hasn't allied with Hybern yet, but he will start to consider it after Fae-vorite's letter. I wonder if the King of Hybern, or at least Ianthe on behalf of the king, has been talking to Tamlin and trying to entice him as of right now. However, of course, we know that Tamlin has sealed his borders where not even Azriel can find a way in, so he's not wanting to talk to anybody right now. That's probably another main reason Hybern wants Fae-vorite to have her as a bargaining chip to ally with Tamlin, and Ianthe is helping with all of this behind the scenes and feeding Hybern useful information about Fae-vorite's family and where she may go while Tamlin is distracted and going ballistic over her being gone.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Rhys sends 2 spears of night into the Adder's wings, pinning it against a tree, sending silver blood splattering to the floor, which, pause, because that's the coolest power I've ever read on a page. 2 spears of night. Like, what? Why do we not see this more?
Our OG King Shadow Daddy.
We love him.
That's all I have to say. Yep.
The Adder quickly caves and shares that his orders were to get Fae-vorite because the King of Hybern wants her.
Pause, because the Adder caves really fast. Like, wow. For being such a lover of torture and being all evil in his element, you'd think he'd be a tougher egg to crack. But no, he's like an omelet buffet. Just tell me what you want and here you go, served on a silver platter.
You're funny. I think it's a show don't tell of just how weak he is. Like, he is a weak little minion, and he is not a great person to have in your team, King of Hybern. But why does the King of Hybern want Fae-vorite? Does he want her to use the Book of Breathings? But he doesn't know that they're hunting the book yet. And in the end of the book, he's like, oh, it wasn't even on our mind. So I don't think that's the reason. Is it to help with his case for Tamlin, who he assumes is going to ally with him soon? Is it just for shits and giggles? Because like you were saying, she's a hot commodity. Like, why does the King of Hybern want her now? This is before Tamlin allies with Hybern.
I think all of the above. I think that, yeah, she is extremely useful and he wants her.
I think she's just a really good bartering chip for him to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he doesn't know how truly powerful she is yet.
But he does know that she is extremely special.
Yes.
But not necessarily how powerful she is.
However, we do learn several more tidbits of info. First, the King of Hybern has an army. Its size limit does not exist.
The Adder says they have allies in every territory, which makes me pause on a reread because do they? Or is it more like spies? Which is very different because he's acting like he's got armies in every territory. Is the Adder lying or doesn't have the correct info? I think that's more what it is. He just doesn't have the correct info.
Oh, see, I read it more as spies, like they had spies in every territory. But if that's the case, who the hell are the spies in the Night Court?
Oh, I'm sure like anybody outside of Velaris could be it.
That's fair point. Fair point. Asriel arrives and, quote, the siphons atop his scarred hands flickered like rippling blue fire as he reached for the Adder. Before the Adder could scream, it and the Spy Master vanished. We're settling this now, Lexi. Does Asriel winnow, or does he use a different type of winnow-esque power? Because Feyre notes how she did not even know he could winnow in this moment, and she wonders if the power is just too draining for him.
I guess I just assumed that was the answer because Feyre told us so. No. I think maybe he just really prefers flying for obvious reasons. And that, yeah, he can winnow, but of course there's different levels of ability to winnow. And he certainly doesn't have Rhys's or Thera's ability to winnow, or Mor's too. So I think that it is kind of used selectively. And hey, I think he just prefers flying usually.
Well, I wonder if the siphons are like a super power battery booster, but they are also like highly draining. And so he only uses them to winnow when absolutely necessary, like this instance.
Possibly, although, but yeah, because he would have to have that capability beforehand. I do think that there is a lot more tied in with his Shadow Singer-ness, though.
Oh, yeah. Well, because we know it's not solely a siphon thing because Cassian does not winnow. Now, I do wonder if this is like you're saying, like a super special Shadow Singer ability to winnow, because later when they're flying into Hybern, he flies almost as if they were shadows. I like picture it as if it was, you know, how Severus Snape like flies sort of in like almost like that bat-like movement, but it's like all shadows. I almost picture that as how Asriel moves when he's, you know, flying as a shadow form. So is his winnowing just super fast shadow travel? We're settling this now. What is it?
Well, okay, so we know that Shadow Singers are exceptionally rare, and it's a certain type of power. So I wonder if because of this extra power he has, it means he can winnow. And therefore, Shadow Singers can winnow because the shadows give him like that boost of power. I won't say literally, but the magic within him means he is inherently more powerful than other Illyrians and Fae.
Okay. I will accept that answer.
I do think that he can winnow, but it is less powerful. I think that he prefers to fly. And I do think that him being a Shadow Singer really does play into it, both giving him that boost of power and giving him also almost like a third way of not just flying or winnowing, but like a combo of both of them that are relied upon the shadows.
And I'll also throw one more thing into he can winnow, but it's just shorter distances. If he uses his siphons and like drains the power of his siphons, he can winnow further, but he only does that when absolutely necessary. Because that's a long way to travel from the human lands to the human city. So that's my guess. All right. Put a period on it. Tie it up with a bow. There you go.
There we go.
It is time for Rhys to take a massive capital L. Feyre realizes that she was used for bait, and Rhys's answer is, I would do it again, and maybe next time he will tell her. Woof, my guy. Woof.
Feyre has already told Rhys from the Weaver incident that she doesn't like being tricked, and she wants him to fill her in on his plan that involves her. And he did it again just now, but on an even bigger level.
Plus, Feyre also thought that she was training how to use her powers, how to step up, how to become more powerful in this moment. But the entire time, it was part of a bigger scheme. She feels like she was being used for this bigger plan, and she wasn't privy to it in a moment where she thought she was getting that push to grow, that moment of, here's everything you've wanted. You wanted to learn how to use your powers, and here you go. But actually, nope, sorry, you're getting used for bait. Rhys is always pushing members of his court to grow, specifically Feyre. Feyre, which is why here he reminds her that she completely forgot that she was strong, that she can burn, she can become darkness and grow claws. This is still an Alpha Rhys, though, because after he lets her rage show, he starts playing with her, laughing as he tells her to try harder as she storms towards him and he continually winnows away. I understand that he's wanting to make her angry so that she showcases her powers, but this is not the way to do it. It does work, though. Her talons come out. Note that it is talons, though, and not claws. Talons are Rhys's beast form and how it's described. But then our girl does winnow for the first time. And to be honest, it's so cool seeing how this is described. And so because of that, I'm quoting the whole damn thing. Quote, "Time slowed and curled, and I could see the darkness of him turn into smoke and veer, as if it were running for another spot in the clearing. I hurled towards that spot, even as I felt my own lightness folding my very self into wind and shadow and dust, the looseness of it radiating out of me, all while I aimed for where he was headed." Ah, the writing, so good. Rhys looks at her shocked and delighted because his plan worked. But Rhys, it's not time for that. And he deserves the yelling of, "Don't ever use me as bait again." Feyre tells him to teach her how to be a weapon, not a pawn. And if he does it again, she is out. Number one, I love this for Feyre because this is her taking her own power back and refusing to let someone else control her. Take it in complete opposition to it when she was in the Spring Court, and she was very much in letting everyone else control her because she was so lost in her own darkness. But the second reason that I want to point out here is I love Rhys. I love him so much. He's my number one book boyfriend. Maybe not right now, but I would take Cassian's instruction any freaking day over Rhys's. You just will it into being and see what happens. Like, fuck around and find out.
Retweet. Yep, all of this. Especially the part about Cassian training me, although I would probably regret saying that because I suck at physical activity, despite my run, walk, jogs. I gotta side with Feyre here and completely understand her anger at Rhys. A little later, she'll say, "You said I could be a weapon. Teach me to become one." Essentially, be her own weapon. Be powerful. But then he pulls stunts like this where, yes, in his own way, he is encouraging her to reach into her inner power and fight back. All he wants is for her to fight, try harder, stop giving up, and really push herself. But his methods feel like they take that control and freedom away from her. Is he doing this in her best interest? Yes. However, he's the puppeteer here, and that's why she is so angry. If he's all about choice, which we do agree he always is, then why is he using her like a pawn and taking that choice away from her? Feyre needs to be baited with coaxing emotions to feel alive and simply feel something, not be actual bait where she's a pawn in his schemes.
I feel like in this moment, Rhys is so tunnel vision to his own scheming, his own baiting, that he is not reading context clues of that emotional intelligence. It's one of the reasons why we think Cassian is so definitely the highest EQ of all of them versus Rhys here, who is definitely putting his Ravenclaw scheming over that tapping into the empathy of being able to read her emotions.
Yes.
Rhys apologizes multiple times, though, realizing he done fucked up. My headcanon is that it was the "I'm done" that Feyre says that finally makes him think that, maybe laughing and pushing her to anger is not the best move right now. I do got to give it to Rhys. He is apologizing. That is not something he normally does. He still gets a very large capital L here.
It's a fine line between that needing to be baited to bring out the anger and being literal bait, like I was just saying. And that's where he's like, oh shit, you're right. I went too far and I crossed that line from empowerment to pawn. But his words that she forgot about her powers and her ability to fight stick with her because she admits to herself that she did forget. She faced the adder again and shrank back into a helpless human in his presence. Although, to be fair, Rhys arrived so fast that she didn't have much time to tap into her strength and instincts, but anyway, even still, she is far more powerful than the adder, and Rhys, of course, knows this. Remember what we were just saying, how he delights in having the upper hand on the adder now with his powers back. He wants her to feel that confidence and control too, because it's within her, and there is a fast approaching war where she absolutely needs to be ready to face the adder and far worse.
Well, let us not forget the Battle of Velaris, where she will not only face the adder, but utterly obliterate him. And that is a moment where she remembers, I have all of these powers at my disposal, and she uses every single one of them. I cannot wait to cover that scene. Rhys tells Feyre that they can eat breakfast and then go home to Velaris, to which Feyre replies that Velaris is not her home. Quote, I could have sworn hurt flashed in his eyes before he spirited us back to my family's house. Oh, that's sad. This is a sad moment for Rhys. This place that he desperately cares for more than anything else in the world, she was starting to slowly, show signs of life again in this beautiful city. And now he's hearing his mate, who, to be fair, is pissed off at him. So, I'm not faulting Feyre here. He's now hearing his mate say that this healing environment is not a place she finds home in, and it makes him sad because he wants her to find as much joy and solace in this place as he does. But we do go back to Velaris, friends. Our crew heads back to the city of Starlight, not without Cassian bowing and Nesta flipping him off or giving him a vulgar gesture in return. I love that moment where Feyre is surprised because she didn't know that Nesta even knew how to make that gesture or what it even meant. Again, it's priming us for that naughty Nesta who can match Cassian's vulgarity. Vulgarity? Is that a word? Sure.
I don't know.
It is now.
Back in Velaris, Feyre is reading a book when Rhys returns from the Bartok Adder ass-kicking interrogation. And although she was recently livid with him, quote, something tight in my chest eased when I found nothing amiss. Showing that while yes, she can be so angry with him, she of course cares deeply for him, even if she's not willing to admit it yet to herself.
We learned that it took Azriel less than an hour to break the adder. Again, this show don't tell of this weak-willed adder while simultaneously showing us how good Azriel is at his job.
Yeah, the adder is just so cowardly. And I have to wonder if Amarantha or the King of Hybern know he breaks so easily. Probably not, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't keep sending him into enemy territory to do their dirty work so often. If they know he'll break and spill the beans almost immediately when caught.
Maybe that's why they don't, or at least King of Hybern doesn't tell him anything, because the adder keeps saying, don't know. Rhys offers Feyre a choice. There's that word again. It's up to her to decide how much she wants to know about their methods. And she wants to know everything. A luxury, no, a right that she was not offered in the Spring Court, and she takes him up on the whole damn pie. So he shows her, again, allowing her into his mind, into an antechamber he's carved out just for her to view this recent memory.
I just love how this magic is described always.
Quote, darkness flowed through me, soft and seductive, echoing up from an abyss of power so great it had no end and no beginning. It's time to start the count of no end and no beginning. Here's our number one. But I love this moment of Feyre stepping into Rhys's body through this memory and feeling just how much power this dude has. It's good for us readers to be reminded of that.
Well, and it calls back to when she felt all of that controlled power roiling within him back in the memory with Ianthe. I know there's some great Rhys fanfics out there, and I wonder how they must weave this power into his POV.
Which, really quick, shouts to Illyrian Tremors, who has the entire kit and caboodle of Rhys's POV. I've read it a few times. It's phenomenal. Really well done. We'll put it in the show notes.
I must say, it's so fitting that the adder isn't in Velaris. Of course, Rhys wouldn't have enemy interrogation there, as he keeps his two selves so divided, and with the adder now in Hewn City.
What do we learn from this adder utterly breaking in 5 seconds, though? Azriel learns that a small enemy force has infiltrated the north 2 days ago. I'm assuming when he says north, he means the Night Court, because the Night Court is the north. So quick question on this. Do we ever learn more about this small force that has infiltrated?
I don't think so. I think that the main takeaway with this small force infiltrating the north is that they are actively hunting Feyre and know she's in the Night Court, and that's that.
Well, I'm assuming when they say small force, they're talking about a Hybern force, not Lucian and the Spring Court sentries.
Right. He will go in separately, and that is definitely different, because Lucian will say that things got bad in the Spring Court and it took a turning point after Feyre's letter.
Next, we learn that the adder received word from the king that Feyre and co were in the mortal realm, but we do not know how the King of Hybern knew where she was. Only the adder got the order and flew straight to the wall as fast as he could.
And like we were saying earlier, we have our speculations. Maybe it was Ianthe, maybe they already had spies, or whatever, but yeah, we never fully find out. The adder tries to bargain with Rhys and propose that the king can help Rhys keep Feyre from Tamlin, which honestly sounds laughable knowing how powerful Rhys is compared to anyone else, including Tamlin. But it does illustrate just how big of a deal this was on a political scale, as the lovely Cressida will emphasize in the next stretch of chapters. I can't wait to get to that. We also learn, not from the adder, but from being in Rhys's POV, that Tamlin has shut down his borders and sealed sealed them so tightly, even flying overhead at night or communicating with inserted spies is impossible. Well, that's ominous, and we can all imagine how Tamlin is these days in reaction to Feyre being taken away from his home.
Rolling my eyes at that. Get therapy, my guy. Last thing we learn from Rhys actually slipping into the Adder's mind, it's notably he does not go into any memories from under the mountain. He sees images of the army the King of Hybern has built, quote, the twin to the one I fought against 5 centuries ago. In case we did not know as readers, our crew is royally fucked. But there's a little bit more info we learn in this scene, and it's some insight into Asriel's character. Rhys notes how people often think that Cassian is the one who could never be tamed, but there is an icy rage that has never thawed within Asriel, wondering if the Shadowsinger gift came to Asriel when he was locked in his father's keep. Quote, perhaps he taught himself the language of shadows and wind and stone. We can say with high certainty that Asriel is going to be one of the main POVs in next book. I'm really excited to get more insight into this side of him, this stone cold, icy rage that is unable to be thawed, and how that works with the possibility of a romantic relationship with Elaine.
Well, and I'm really excited to learn more about his shadows, too.
Yes.
We get a tiny teaser about his, for lack of a better word, relationship with his shadows in the Silver Flames bonus chapter. And I agree. It'll be exciting to learn more about his backstory and how his shadows and magic work from more of his POV.
The memory ends with the Adder screaming under Asriel's instruction to break its legs and dump him off the coast of Hybern. Goodbye for now, motherfucker.
I will say, I was genuinely surprised that they didn't kill the Adder and preferred sending his broken body as a message.
Yes.
That shows where my mind is. Personally, I think breaking his body and killing him, then dumping him would have been equally as good a message. But I get it. We need Feyre to be the one to ultimately kill him. And I suppose it's Rhys's way of saying, I caught your pet, Mr. King of Hybern, and look what I did to him. But hey, I'm better than you and didn't actually kill him. After seeing all of what just went down, naturally, Feyre's first response is, what situation with the Spring Court? I mean no shade with that. I'm kind of making fun of it, but I mean no shade. It's emotionally realistic that this is what she fixates on instead of, say, the endless army coming their way.
Well, because it's more real to her. She's been there. She's seen it. Like, she has not seen these armies that they fought against 5 centuries ago and such. Rhys, again, apologizes for his earlier deception and using her to catch the Adder. This is, again, a show don't tell for us as readers of how much this has been eating away at him, that she is genuinely angry at him. But Feyre's only response is, quote, I need to write a letter.
Dun, dun, dun. Underwear drawers are like the Perithian of wardrobes. They're a dangerous place. You've got pairs from 3 birthdays and 2 Christmases ago, pairs from 5 different brands with 5 different fits. When you open up that drawer every morning, us mere mortals have no idea what to expect. But now that I felt the buttery, soft comfort of MeUndies, my other pairs have got to go, because MeUndies is literally all I reach for. I'm hooked, and honestly, I just feel off if I wear anything else.
My favorite thing about MeUndies is that there is truly a pattern for anyone. Do you want something that's sexy? They have it. Do you want something that celebrates the book nerd in you? You've got it. Want something that has narwhals on it and then you can sing the narwhal song to your husband anytime you wear them? They've got that too. I'll give you one guess as to which one I picked. They are truly my favorite underwear, and they always bring a smile to my and my husband's face.
From all black classics to fun, expressive prints, MeUndies has a look for everyone. Plus, they come in sizes extra small to 4XL, guaranteeing a flattering cut for every body. And best of all, they use sustainably sourced materials and work with partners that care for their workers. Plus, if you're not happy with your first pair of undies, it's on MeUndies.
Get 20% off your first order plus free shipping at MeUndies.com/FFG. That's MeUndies.com/FFG for 20% off plus free shipping for your first pair of MeUndies. MeUndies, comfort from the outside in. It is time to talk about Feyre's letter to Tamlin. It is, quote, I left of my own free will. I am cared for and safe. I am grateful for all that you did for me, all that you gave. Please don't come looking for me. I'm not coming back. This is straight and to the point. I appreciate it. Yep. I appreciate it a lot. Quick note, I love that Rhys's response to reading this is, "Are you sure?" Which it can be read in multiple ways. Are you sure you want to send this? Which is what we assume it is on the first read. And then also, are you sure you never want to go back? Basically saying, okay, you're staying here. Because remember, just a few hours after she snapped in the Spring Court, she said to him, "This is just my temporary place. I'm just hanging out in the Night Court temporarily." This is her saying in so many ways, I found a home here. I want to stay. But I also want to take a moment and dissect receiving this letter from Tamlin's point of view. Because of course, he doesn't believe that this letter is actually from Feyre. And I'm not going to lie, I shit on Tamlin a lot. Deservedly so. I think it's fair that he doesn't assume that this is real. For one, does he know that she can actually read and write? I said this earlier, but Q Malfoy's like, I didn't know you could read. If he doesn't know that she can read and write, this does indeed look like a huge setup from the Night Court, and honestly not a very diabolical one at that, having written the letter pretending to be Feyre.
Or breaking into her mind and controlling her, which Rhys has literally been known to do, to write this and pretend like everything is fine.
Exactly. And later when she sees him at the King of Hybern's place and she's like, I told you I was fine, his only response is, you weren't well, which but
okay, so remember, again, from Tamlin's POV, it makes sense why he feels this way. Now, Feyre did read while in the Spring Court. However, it was how she occupied herself while Tamlin was gone. And come on, friends, it's not like she told Tamlin Rhys taught her how to read and write. Maybe off page she told him she taught herself, but that would be an odd off page not mentioned reveal.
It's also a show don't tell for us as readers that Tamlin was not paying attention enough to see how quickly her reading was improving. Tamlin thinking that Feyre is still illiterate aside, maybe, he also forgot that she was illiterate in his rage panic. We have to emphasize here, because that's not the only reason that this letter would be not believable in his eyes.
Yeah, it's reason B.
It's B, C, D, maybe even F. Reason A, the Night Court is his number one enemy. Yes, even above Hybern. Because remember, his family was allies with Hybern. He has more of an in with Hybern than Rhys. Rhys is purposely portraying himself as a villain to the rest of the world. Let's not forget everything he did to Feyre outwardly under the mountain. It was not a good look for our guy Rhys. So again, of course, Tamlin does not believe the contents of this letter. Also, remember when she returned after her first visit to the Night Court, Tamlin was looking over her again and again and again, even though she was saying, I'm fine, no one touch me, I'm fine, no one touch me. And he did not believe a single word that she said. So him receiving this letter, hearing from her, even if Rhys was not his number one enemy, even if he didn't know that she wasn't illiterate anymore, he also is not prone to believing her word over his own assuredness.
Well, and going back to thinking of everything Rhys has done over the centuries, not even recently, but over the centuries. Plus, as far as Tamlin knows, he was indeed Amarantha's lapdog, at least until the very end. And he paraded Feyre around in scandalous clothes, made her dance for him, all of this to get a rise out of Tamlin. So yes, of course it makes sense that he thinks Rhys took Feyre, and he's terrified by what is happening to her after how insistent he has been to protect. So as far as our timeline goes, as of right now, Tamlin is not allied with the King of Hybern. After Feyre confirms Ianthe pushed Tamlin to Hybern, Lucien says, quote, he was frantic. The scholars at the day court worked too slowly. I begged him for more time, but you'd already been gone for months. He wanted to act, not wait, despite that letter you sent. Because of that letter you sent. I finally told him to go ahead with it after that day in the forest. So with that knowledge from Lucien, here's what I think happened. Tamlin was obviously freaking the fuck out before Feyre sent the letter. Ianthe had probably mentioned Hybern to him already, or Hybern had proposed an alliance, but he said, no way, Jose, you're a bad guy. And then after the letter, he realized maybe Hybern was the solution, but Lucien kept him from doing that. And Lucien said he's already been trying to find her, but he's like, please, let me just keep trying, let me keep trying. And he does find her. And once Lucien saw Feyre and how the Night Court corrupted her, again from their POV, The Spring Court figured there was no other option, which again, from their perspective, I do kind of get. We'll get into all of that way later in this deep dive, but I just wanted to share that timeline there.
Now, all of this to say from Lexi and I, we firmly believe this is not, oh, Feyre shouldn't have written the letter, because no, definitely not. While it does not do a lot for Tamlin in his POV, this does a lot for our girl Feyre. Her head feels clearer than it has in months. End quote. I wanted it. Life. People. I wanted to see the city. I feel it's rushed through my blood. No boundaries, no limits to what I might encounter or do. Many of us know that feeling of closure, whether it's a message, a conversation, or just time to yourself that you literally forgot that they existed. And it feels like you're lighter than air for the first time after so much heaviness and sadness. Again, it is just such a beautiful, relatable moment from our girl Feyre.
Now, I do want to comment on how Feyre gets a lot of flack on the internet for her breakup via letter. And while I agree you should never break up over a text, I would like to ask, what was her alternative? Say nothing? Even though the letter did more harm than good, silence from Feyre would have been just as disturbing. So something is better than nothing, in my opinion. Should she go to him in person and talk? She is traumatized from being locked up in his manor. You think the moment she set foot near him in the Spring Court, he'd let her out of his sight? Then she would really be imprisoned. I don't even think a better written letter would have resolved anything. No matter what, Tamlin wouldn't have believed it, like Nicole was just saying. Because again, the Night Court are the bad guys to almost everyone else in Prythian, especially the Spring Court. I will say, however, that maybe Feyre could have stepped it up a little bit in this breakup letter and shared more from the heart. Again, I don't think that he would have believed anything. I'm also just saying that because I write novels for letters. It's something that I'm kind of well known for in my family. Yeah. In Feyre's defense, this letter she wrote was very in character for her, and it was hard enough for her to find these words. Plus, we have to go back to the emotional abuse that Tamlin put her through. Because yes, that is what it was. They had difficulty communicating with each other, and when she was open and honest about her true feelings about their relationship and him, he blew up the study. She doesn't feel like she can explain herself to him because he is not someone who will listen and reasonably respond. So yeah, as I'm saying all of this, I truly do understand why the letter was so short and to the point. And I don't know an alternative that would have helped Tamlin calm down and let go of her, especially after she left the way that she did.
And I will say this, I think that there is a time and a place for a breakup letter, or, making it more applicable to us 21st century people, a breakup text. When you are in an abusive relationship where your safety is in question and your freedom is in question, if we're looking at Feyre, in those cases, from a distance breakup, I think that those are intelligent because it's putting your safety over their comfort, which
that is
something
really
you're
good
not
point.
doing.
Thank you for saying that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way, and that's really important.
So Feyre asks to Rhysand, again, feeling lighter than air for the first time in forever, what's next? Our goal getter. She's back in action. Yay!
Yeah, girl.
And even when Rhys tells her to rest and that he's making assessments based off her current condition, she retorts back with I will be the person who decides that, taking her own power back, saying the reins of my life are mine again.
You go, fair darling.
So no rest, instead dinner. That's my favorite motto. I'm not kidding. Also, that's entirely accurate.
Meanwhile, I'm like, please just give me the rest. I need to rest.
My Patronus is the stoat, which is always looking in burrows for food, which is extremely accurate. So instead, Rhys says, quote, tonight, let's find out if you, Feyre darling, are all talk, or if you'll let a Lord of Night take you out on the town.
Break up with your lusty loser ex and go out on the town with the Bat Boys. Rhys is so excited, quote, perhaps a bit of happiness edged with relief, because just earlier that day, she corrected him that Velaris was not her home. And here she is saying, okay, show me your home. And he's like, okay.
As Feyre is getting ready for dinner and listening to the literal sitcom that is happening downstairs, because Cassian and Mor are arguing. Cassian saying that he can fly a short destination faster than she can winnow to said destination. Again, like, what episode of How I Met Your Mother did these people come from? But I love it so much. Feyre is then greeted by Amren. When Amren shows up, Nuala and Caradwyn immediately vanish. Quote, wraiths are nothing but shadow and mist, able to walk through walls, stone, you name it. I don't don't even know where those two were conceived. High Fae will stick their cocks anywhere. I really want to know the Nuala and Caradwyn backstory. How did they end up with Rhys? Where are their parents? But alas, I do not think that is a story we will ever get. That is definitely off the table. But we do learn that they were trained by Azriel, and they do report to him and Rhys, but they report to Azriel specifically on Amren's movements, despite Rhys telling him not to have them spy. Feyre is surprised and asks if Rhys punishes Azriel for disobeying his order. And again, we have to look at this with Feyre's previous knowledge. Imagine this in the Spring Court, and Tamlin told Lucien to do something, and Lucien was like, fuck no, and outright disobeyed his orders. Things would not look good for Lucien at all. Amren, however, answers Feyre's question, telling her the Court of Dreams values to defend, to honor, and to cherish. Rhys doesn't rule with brute strength and obedience, but instead rules and values with loyalty, cunning, and compassion. While Azriel, yes, is being disobedient, he is acting to defend his court and his people, so he will never be punished for that. Let's again examine Feyre's knowledge up until now on how court hierarchy works. Brute strength and obedience, those were the only two pillars of the Spring Court.
I believe Rhys has even described Tamlin as such on varying occasions, especially the brute strength, and then, of course, the obedience is, we all know about that.
Feyre even goes back to thinking about the tithe and asks when is there a tithe in the Night Court? And Amren tells her that there are taxes on city members, but there is no tithe. While we have absolutely started seeing this new side of Rhys as this leader in ACOMAF who is kind and compassionate, in ACOTAR, Under the Mountain, Rhys was a symbol of obedience, seemingly obedient as the whore to Amarantha and making others obedient to his own will with his Daemati powers. And here we are hearing directly from his second that he is the kind of leader who is the polar opposite. Kindness and honor above all else. As our crew struts the streets of Velaris, they begin talking about new shops, music, clubs, and sports teams. Those sports teams Feyre has never heard of, but, quote, apparently Amren was a vicious, obsessive supporter of one. What? Listen, I said I need Nuala and Caradwyn's backstory. Fuck off. I desperately need this novella of raging sports fan Amren who rallies against Ethan when it comes to Sunball support.
I was going to say Sunball. That's what I was going to say. Where is the fan art of Amren at a Sunball game, decked out in her gear, screaming foul at the ref? And then the ref does whatever she says because everyone is just so scared of making her angry. But in sort of seriousness, we've said before how refreshing it is that this found family embraces normalcy. And here we see it on full display. Yes, they are essentially leading the charge against a war with an evil king, but they also just want to have fun and enjoy this precious time together. Not in an immature, avoiding responsibilities kind of way, but in a way where they understand how precious and fleeting this joy can be, considering how much sorrow and death and trauma they've endured throughout the centuries. You can't truly appreciate the good until you've experienced the bad kind of look. And I just think that's really beautifully captured here so subtly.
The Inner Circle continues their walk, and Feyre notices music, clanks of silverware on plates, scrapes of chairs, sounds of people talking, sounds of life. Remember back in the Spring Court, there was such unending silence. People were hiding away in the manor, and Feyre felt so lonely. But here, quote, the sounds of it all might have been the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. She realizes that there has been so much that she's missed out on these months of numbness, and she's now realizing how much life, sheer life, is around her.
She's no longer turning her back to it or even looking through a window at this life. Now she's choosing to experience it herself. She's taking baby steps and, yes, maybe mostly observing, but she's out here walking and soaking it all in new ways. Compare these descriptions of Velaris to her first tour of Velaris. Quote, there was no place like this in the world, not so serene, so loved by its people and its rulers. She's curious about the theaters. She's noticing how the people are acting. Like Nicole said, she's soaking up all the vibrant life around her and she's experiencing it.
We also get a quick wing watch. Rhys's wings are unsurprisingly out as they walk through Velaris. This is the only time I believe that when they're out in public or where others who are not the Inner Circle are around, that Rhys's wings are out, it is always in Velaris, aka his home. The crew enters a restaurant. I love this scene. A few quick notes. I love that the restaurant owner, whose name we later learn in ACOWAR is Sfenda, she bows to Amren, but not to Rhys, who she kisses everyone in the inner circle on both cheeks. Second thing I want to note, do you ever hear how food is described in a book or you see it in like a cartoon and you just want it? You just want it so badly. What are these spices that do this to you? I need to, Papa Archeron, tell me. Speaking of, it's time for Spice Watch. Sfenda says that it is so lovely to have spices available again. Friendly reminder that during Amarantha's reign of that 49 years, they halted all trade to the outside world, which meant that imported spices were basically gone or very hard to come by for 50 years. Later, Rhys mentions how those who are in trade with Velaris, this is outside of Amarantha's reign, they are unable to spill any secrets of the city, and they are granted adept skills at lying. I have a question for my spices crack theory, and that is, how on earth would the knowledge of this spice trade be passed down through the Archeron generations before they went into debt? So this is, 3+ generations ago. How would they have passed down that information? I need a Spice Watch timeline now.
Well, okay, so me with my timelines and you with your spice theory, I think we can make it happen.
Give us an hour and a whiteboard and we can conquer the world, Lexi. Sfenda then turns to Feyre and asks if she likes the food, to which Feyre replies that she's never had food quite like this, food that makes her feel awake. Since coming to Velaris, and really since returning from under the mountain, Feyre has been consistently tired due to her depression. This awake language is so specific to this next stage of Feyre's healing journey. She is starting to wake up after, like we were saying, those months of numbness.
Feyre recognizes who she also used to be in Sfenda. Quote, the happiness on her face, the satisfaction that only a day of hard work doing something you love could bring, hit me like a stone. I remembered feeling that way. In ACOTAR, she would jump out of bed in the morning and paint all day until night. That part of her is gone, seemingly dead, but it's more just buried deep down as she's experienced this numbness, this drain of life and color and light and fulfillment. And ever so slowly, that spark is flickering in her again. She's not tapping into her artistic self quite yet, but it is coming very soon, which we'll get to, though she's connecting with someone over a shared feeling of doing what they love. And she knew just what to say in the most genuine, heartfelt way to make Sfenda beam. After all, no one leaves her restaurant hungry.
Quick shout out to Clarendon for supporting this episode and providing us with some samples. As Cassian can attest, there is nothing worse than allergies, and mine have a tendency to stop me in my tracks. Being the high achiever type A that I am, I always am on the go, go, go. This is both Lexi and I. But allergies make us feel so sluggish, so miserable. It's like having a cold, but for an entire season. Luckily, for those of us who live with the symptoms of allergies, shouts to you, Cassian, we can live Clarendon Clear with Claritin D.
Designed for serious allergy sufferers like Cassian and me, Claritin D has 2 powerful ingredients in just one pill that relieve your allergy symptoms and decongest your nose so you can breathe better. Trust me, I have a cold right now, and all I wish is that it was actually allergies so Claritin D could fix it. This double action combination of prescription strength allergy medication and the best decongestant available relieves sneezing, a runny nose, itchy and watery eyes, an itchy nose and throat, and sinus congestion and pressure with ease.
Ready to live a life as if you don't have allergies? It's time to live Claritin Clear. Fast and powerful relief is just a quick trip away. You can find Claritin Clear at the pharmacy counter. Just ask for Claritin D at your local pharmacy counter. You don't even need a prescription. Go to Claritin.com right now for a discount so you can live Claritin Clear. Use as directed. Too full to sleep. More Cassian and Azriel all head off to Rita's for some good old-fashioned clubbing. As Moore announces that she's wanting to go and head off to Rita's, Azriel, to Feyre's surprise, is the first one to jump on the bandwagon. There's again, Azriel being first to raise his hand, mirroring Elaine. Except for this is about clubbing, not about saving the mortal realm, but that's fine.
While we're on the subject, we have yet to discuss about the Moore-Azriel dynamic on the pod, but now's as good a time as any to dive in, or at least scratch the surface. There's a lot to it that we'll continue discussing. Azriel has been in love with Moore for 500 years, and Moore knows it. However, while there's many reasons these two will never be together, the top two reasons are, number one, Mor, while bisexual, prefers the company of women over men, and two, Azriel doesn't view himself as someone who would ever be worthy of Mor.
This starts all the way back when she slept with Cassian way long ago, and we learn from Mor in ACOWAR that the incident, quote unquote, Azriel took her and Cassian's night of passion as her deeming Azriel unsuitable for her. Because of Azriel's unrequited love for Mor, Cassian always plays buffer, often putting himself in the middle of these two and also being more touchy-feely with Mor, but that's also just more of his character. He does this to A, make Mor feel more comfortable, and B, protect his brother's heart from getting continually hurt by Mor. This dynamic has many people in the fandom disliking Mor, or at least disliking this side of Mor. And I will admit, it's also not my favorite part of Mor's character. She's not ready to tell the group about her attraction to women because she fears her family finding out and shaming this one part of her that is wholly hers. And to be quite honest, that's okay that she has not shared. She will when she's ready. But with all of this said, it's been 500 years. It's time for the I just see you as a friend conversation with this poor Illyrian so his freaking heart can move on. Now, side note, we know that Azriel has had many lovers. He's just good at hiding them, but that's not his heart. That's just him getting it out in that way. We learn in ACOWAR that Mor almost told Azriel when he found her in the Autumn Court with a note nailed to her stomach, but he started to confess his feelings for her and, quote, I just turned and left, and I couldn't face explaining it after that to Az to the others.
Which in that moment was fair. And also, that was 500 years ago.
Which we have to bring up the question, does Azriel know that Mor prefers females? I'm leaning he doesn't know, but he's also a shadow singer. So how does he not know? When Fae-vorite asks this in chapter 66 of ACOWAR, Mor says, quote, he's too observant not to know, but I think that it confuses him whenever I take a male home.
It's like he knows, but he chooses not to know, if that makes sense.
Yes.
For all Mor's reasons for not telling Azriel, it's almost as if she doesn't want him to stop loving her in that way, though.
And I do think, yes, all of that. It's the unconscious part of her that likes being lusted after. And like, we have to highlight, Mor knows she's hot and fun. Like, that's not a bad thing. And this is not a dig at Mor. It's honestly a biological human thing. We want to feel wanted, and Mor's just gotten used to it. And again, I do think that this is a subconscious part of Mor.
Mor not wanting to share this part of her identity is one thing, and I absolutely respect that. And the dynamic with Azriel has been built up to be glaringly obvious, and it does seem to impact the inner circle in subtle ways. I'll be honest, I think what makes me not like the subplot about Mor and Azriel is how much emphasis there is on this found family supporting one another, trusting each other, and being there together through thick and thin. Because of that, it feels disconnected as to why Mor can't be herself with those she is closest to. I'm hesitant to say that though, because it's a delicate topic and I really want to be respectful and acknowledge how difficult it is to come out, even to those you love and trust most. So simply from a writing and storytelling standpoint, this subplot feels a little bit off, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I agree. Off, and it also feels this element of not liking Mor, of not liking how she's treating this person who she does view as family, solely by not, and again, it's not telling him, hey, Azriel, here's a super deep, dark secret of mine. She doesn't have to own up to that if she's not ready to. Instead, it's more of the, hey, Azriel, I don't view you that way. It's been 500 years, but I also think it's been 500 years. They've gotten so used to this dynamic where it's like, oh, why ruffle any feathers? So like, I get it both sides. However, I agree with you from a storytelling standpoint that it does feel off. While we are on the subject of Mor, however, let's dive into one of two popular Mor theories that we're going to be discussing today. The second one being in Maasverse Madness. This one is, could Mor be a traitor/betrayer? We have been tagged in many a theory video on TikTok regarding a betrayal next book. I'm going with this into this theory saying there might be a betrayal next book, but honestly, I'm leaning no from a betrayer in the inner circle. However, in a TikTok by @KenanBurns, she mentions how there are specifically two literary elements that SJM uses to prime us readers for Mor being a traitor. The first is the symbolism of the color red and how it in ACOTAR specifically, and in the ACOTAR world as a whole, is an omen. The first book cover, it's red. it's a pretty bad omen there. Fae-vorite kills Andrus, and the red blood stains the white snow. All of the roses in book 1 in the Spring Court, they are all red, foreshadowing Tamlin's true nature. And then, of course, the buku amounts of red from under the mountain, from Amarantha's hair color to blood being everywhere to the red marble of the floor, so on and so forth. Then in ACOMAF, red is also a very triggering color to Feyre. Kenan Burns also goes on to mention how when Feyre is put into the hewn city, she wears this deep red lipstick, symbolizing her turning into this evil side of her. We're going to put quotations around that. A huge staple of Mor is the color red that she wears left and right, thus using her red outfits to symbolize her being a bad omen. The second symbolism that SJM uses is how she chooses to sequence the 3 surprise attacks from Hybern. Mor is not present for any of the attacks from Hybern, but right after each of these surprise attacks where Mor is not present, there is a scene with Mor. Also in Silver Flames, Eris mentions how the Inner Circle does not know the full story in regards to Mor, and Cassian, by the end of the book, is really leaning towards believing him. So with all of this said of Mor being a bad omen, SJM priming us to have some sort of distrust with Mor, I think that there's a lot of evidence to this theory. I think it's really interesting. Personally, I'm leaning away from it. I do think Mor has secrets, and I think that's what a lot of these omens are leaning towards. I do think that there's much more to her and Eris's story. I think that's one of the main secrets that we're going to be learning in the next few books, but I do not think she's an enemy or working with an enemy. That's it for theory number 1. Theory number 2, I kid you not, Lauren and I from Book Huddle texted back and forth for 2 days about, but that will be in the Maasverse Madness section. Sorry, friends. Back to the scene at hand. As half of our crew heads out to Rita's, Cassian loops his hand through Mor's and starts up the street. Azriel is then a few steps behind, watching them as he walks behind. Quote, "The shadows gathered around his shoulders like they were indeed whispering to him, shielding him perhaps. His broad chest expanded with a deep breath that sent them skittering." What do you think that this is about?
I think part of it is Feyre being very observant, and also we are in her perspective right now. So we are seeing what she wants us to see.
Yes.
And do I think that this actually holds any weight to it? No. I think that we are getting this narration from a busybody gossip's perspective. That's really what I think.
Extremely fair. Yeah. I do think, like, I understand Cassian and his role in protecting his brother and stuff like that. And also my heart really does go out to Azriel in this moment. He's watching his brother and the woman he loves walking in front of him on the street when he was the first to, like, jump into the fray and saying, like, hey, like, I'd like to go. And I don't think that Azriel would want anyone pitying him by any means. Like, that's not his MO. But you can't help but just be like, oh. But I'm not. It's not held against Cassian. Like, he's playing his role as buffer.
And that, again, goes back to, like, the why has this been going on for 500 years?
I'm almost glad that Elaine came into the picture for Azriel, because he needed to
not love Mor anymore. Yes.
Oh my God. Not almost. I am glad. He needed to get over Mor. Rhys and Feyre are left behind and begin walking the streets towards the townhouse and chatting. Rhys mentions how the view of the Rainbow of Velaris is his favorite, and Feyre wonders why he didn't ever just, build a house there, and then wonders why he didn't just reorder the city. Because that's what High Lords do. Whoa. Wow, her view of High Lords is not the best. To which he responds with, quote, "There are a great many things I wish to do and don't get to." He is absolutely talking about her. Like, he's saying,
absolutely.
The struggles of being a High Lord, Matt. But he's talking about their mating bond. He's like, I want to be with you so badly, but I can't.
Feyre asks him why he hasn't married anyone. And he tells her that if anyone married him, it would mean having a target on their and any children's backs forever. This is a really scary thing for him to admit. It is the biggest reason why he fears them being together, or worse, the fear of her never wanting to be with him for this reason.
While walking along the river, Feyre hears music from a group of performers and her jaw begins to drop. This is the same, or at least a reduced version, of the music that Feyre heard in her cell. ACOMAF holds so many moments like this that explain mysteries from ACOTAR that give you chills to hear how they're now explained hundreds and hundreds of pages later. Back in ACOTAR, Feyre was seconds away from breaking entirely in the month after her second task. And the night that she heard this music in her cell, it was 2 days before her final trial. And let's be real, hope was not even lost. It was buried beneath the ground, never to be seen again. And this music stopped her tears and gave her an essence of hope again. She wasn't hunky-dory, but she no longer accepted that her only fate was death in her final trial. This was a really big moment for Fae-vorite in feeling like she could make it out of this alive.
Fae-vorite puts it together that it was indeed Rhys who sent the music and in turn provided her the means to find her inner strength and hope to keep fighting for life and a future. And when she asks why, Rhys says, because you were breaking and I couldn't find another way to save you. Rhys was having to play a very particular role under the mountain. However, sending this music and a memory I'm sure he thought of many times under the mountain to keep himself sane was kindness he could show her since she wouldn't know it was him because it was something that he knew would have helped him in his darkest moments. This memory of that music and its symbolism of Velaris helped him find his own inner strength to keep living another day.
But it wasn't just the music that she experienced in her cell. She also saw herself flying amid the Moonstone Palace, which is above the Hewn City. She did not know that at the time, though. Something Rhys, however, did not send down the bond. My guess is that because of their mating bond, again, this is not the bargain, this is their mating bond, she accidentally saw into his mind and saw the memory of this because she's not a Daemati yet, if we're looking back at ACOTAR. She's not a Daemati yet. So this would have had to have been the mating bond and that bridge-like connection that they have.
Yes, the way I describe it is that deeper connection and intertwining of their souls, which, yes, is the mating bond, but kind of taking it, I'll say even that step further of the descriptions for it, where his happy place shows itself to her. I realize how cheesy that sounds, but it's so true.
It's so true, and I love it. I love the cheese. Back at the townhouse, Rhys and Feyre's texting session, it's back, baby. Later that night, a piece of paper appears inside Feyre's book. It's a note from Rhys telling Feyre that she should come tend to his wounds from their forest fight. Feyre writes back for him to lick his own wounds and leave her be. And the paper was, quote, gone for a while, far longer than it should have taken to write the few words that appeared on the paper when it returned. This is a beautiful show don't tell moment of him taking long because he's debating whether or not to write this, sentence that kicks flirting up to an extra 700 points here. And thank God he does, though, because, quote, I'd much rather you licked my wounds for me. I'm not breathing. A+, sir. A+. Feyre clamps her lips shut to keep from smiling as she writes, lick you where exactly? Oh, the paper vanishes before, quote, I even completed the final mark. I love the relatability of responding with something that makes you smile when you're not trying to. Like, it's that moment you're flirting with someone and you're like, I'm good. Like this.
Yes.
You can't help but smile at your own cleverness and how the paper vanishes so quickly. It's to, show don't tell, that he was nervous, but he was excited to see what she would write back to this level 7,000 kick up of flirting. And thank God the days of your hair is clean, they're over.
Oh, God.
The whole text exchange continues with Rhys telling her that she can lick him anywhere. A+, A+++++++++. So good. And she says for him to hope that her licking is better than his because of how he licked her under the mountain. Ah, yes, the moment right after her second trial where Feyre was completely shattered in her cell, and Rhys, continuing to play his role, licks her tears clean off her face. Brett and I, whenever that scene is referenced, which honestly is more often than it should in our house, we go, like Yoshi, like, That moment shocked her, but it did keep her from shattering completely, which she recognizes in this moment passing notes. It's shattering that monster facade that she saw for him as under the mountain. She thinks how Lucien came to her aid a few times, but Rhys is the only reason she stayed mentally intact, not just from under the mountain though, also from these last few weeks, even right now in the Night Court. How different this is from just a few chapters ago when she was saying to Rhys, don't get me started about what you did to me under the mountain. Rhys's response to her mentioning his licking skill, though, is, quote, if you want, I'd be more than happy to prove you wrong. I've been told I'm very, very good at licking. My pulse is done. Like, it's beep. That's where I'm at right now. Feyre, having so much more self-control than I would in this moment, closes out their text message exchange with good night. But of course, Rhys, being iconic, says, try not to moan too loudly when you dream of me. I need my beauty rest. I love you, Rhys. Oh my God. You know that he's just having the time of his life back in his room. He's finally getting to fully flirt with his mate, and she's finally fully flirting back.
He's taking that leap of faith and it's paying off, which especially has to be a relief because he understands how angry she was with him earlier. And unlike a certain other High Lord, he listened to her frustrations at him and is truly deeply trying to fix it and rebuild that trust between them. And what do you know? Even though she unfortunately dreams of the Adder instead of Rhys that night, she doesn't wake once, showing how, again, she's taking those baby steps towards healing as she feels safe in her surroundings despite the trauma that sticks with her. The story isn't about forgetting or even fully moving past your trauma. It's about learning to live with joy and love and life after it. Speaking of, let's head into one of my all-time favorite scenes in this series, Feyre's first day of training with Cassian. So far since meeting Cassian, he's mostly been comic relief, the class clown, yet we've gleaned already just how empathetic he is. Like earlier when he scolded Nesta and stuck up for Feyre at the Archeron estate. And while we've heard how strong and powerful of a warrior he is, after all he is the commander of Rhys's armies, we haven't seen it in action yet. Him training Feyre is barely scratching the surface of how skilled he is. We won't see him in action facing off an enemy for a while, but we are immediately learning firsthand this other side of Cassian that we, the readers and Feyre, didn't previously know. As Feyre notes, he was a stone cold killer. Yeah, he is. He takes training and fighting very seriously, recognizing and respecting that it is a matter of life and death. He is a patient and empathetic instructor, but that's not to say he doesn't push her to her absolute limit. We'll see how essential his style of teaching is for Nesta in Silver Flames, when really no one else would be capable of getting through to her. He may completely whoop my butt, but I would do just about anything to train with Cassian. He's a natural teacher. I can't get enough of him. I love him so freaking much.
I love reading about characters who are just experts in their fields and say things like for instance, as he's teaching her how to punch, he's like, don't punch with these two fingers because it'll do more damage to you than it will to the punchee. And instead, punch with these two. Like, it's just like little lines like that. It just makes for such good writing. I love it.
And Feyre is quickly realizing she may be a survivalist, but she's shit when it comes to fighting, which is interesting to think considering how she has successfully come out of deadly situations in the past. But yeah, first and foremost, she's a hunter and a survivalist who has relied on those skills plus sheer will, like with the Naga. And now she's learning a whole new set of skills to fight back with strength, precision, and aptitude. Like Rhys's mom made sure he didn't rely solely on his powers, Feyre is taking control of her abilities, so she is a well-rounded weapon too. Hand-to-hand combat is also more approachable for her. Humans could be just as capable of this skill. Well, not to match up against Fae, but you know what I mean. Whereas her powers still feel foreign to her as a new Fae, which is a major reason she'll soon note that her training with Cassian is going a lot better than her training with Rhys.
In A Court of Silver Flames, we learn that Nesta envies Feyre for having all of this upper hand when it comes to combat when she starts training. But we also are in a narrative of a jealous sister comparison. It's real. I remember being younger and thinking that Lexi was better at everything than I was. And I was like, grumpy little younger sister. She's just really talented. And I just love you a lot.
And I think you're really talented too. And I'm really jealous of you.
Really? Okay, we can just be jealous of each other and boost each other's confidence and ego.
That sounds fantastic.
Awesome.
Hey, maybe we should go have a podcast and start a business together.
Yay! Here, I love seeing this from Feyre's POV, how she feels like she's, quote, as uncoordinated as a newborn fawn attempting to walk. I love how that's SJM's way of saying Bambi. I love that right there.
During this training session, we learn several things. Number one, Azriel is unable to infiltrate the Mortal Queen's palace because there is some sort of barrier around it, which is low-key alarming as it primes us for them assumably using magic to their own advantages and that they are quite secretive. And it raises questions about when this barrier was secured that even Azriel can't penetrate. Sorry. Like, has this barrier been in place for centuries to protect them from their old Fae overlords? Or was it recently installed because they know war is approaching? If that's the case, how are they able to use that magic? Is it another gift from the Fae, like winnowing, or their powerful allies / accomplices on the continent? We know that they are in somewhat of cahoots with Koschei because they essentially sold out the Sixth Queen to him. In the grand scheme of things, I don't think it greatly matters for our story story beyond recognizing these mortal queens have their own agendas, but it is worth thinking about.
I love how it's described that Azriel is brooding and basically just a little pissy party because he wasn't able to make it farther in his task for the day. Azriel does not feel worthy in a lot of regards, but his ability to be a good spy master, it's something that he is prideful of. And the fact that he isn't living up to his own, I would gather, impossible standards for himself, it does cause him to not have a good day.
And how his brothers, in this case specifically Rhys, understand that about him and are helping him work through his frustration through sparring. Again, showing just how in tune they are with one another after centuries together. A second thing we learned during this training session is that these bat boys are covered in tattoos, which they receive when they are initiated as Illyrian warriors for luck and glory on the battlefield. More on that in Fae-vorite Moments. And last thing we learn, these bat boys have got some bodies. Oh, my sexy cold voice there, bodies.
Oh, that was so musky and interesting.
I'm so sorry, everyone. Which leads to a monumental moment for Feyre. I doubted Cassian was drinking in the rest of the image, though. The stomach muscles gleaming with sweat in the bright sun, the bunching of their powerful thighs, the rippling strength in their backs, surrounding those mighty, beautiful wings. Death on Swift Wings. The title came out of nowhere, and for a moment, I saw the painting I'd create, the darkness of those wings, faintly illuminated with lines of red and gold by the radiant winter sun, the glare off their blades, the harshness of the tattoos against the beauty of their faces. This is clearly a callback to ACOTAR, when almost every episode before Under the Mountain, I was admiring Feyre's artist's mind at work. But Under the Mountain stole that unique part of her soul, sucking the color and light and artistry from her and how she viewed the world, leaving her feeling empty. As that spark of light begins flickering again, surrounded by a supportive and welcoming family and in a new place that crackles with life and beauty and joy, her soul is beginning to heal, which directly correlates to her thinking like an artist again. Right here in this moment, she tapped into that creative part of herself and viewed life in front of her as she would approach a painting. Feyre still has a ways to go, but the fact that this comes to her out of nowhere is her tapping into her passions again and what makes her come alive. In this moment, she, even if it's just brief, lets a core part of her identity that was lost come back to the surface.
Cassian mentions how Rhys is out of shape, but Azriel is too polite to beat him into the dirt, which, quote, Rhys looked anything but out of shape. I can see this moment so vividly. So good. But I also want to point out that it's fair that Rhys does appear to be out of shape, at least in Cassian's honed eye. Rhys was under the mountain for 50 years, and the only tool he relied on in his arsenal, at least that we saw, was the remnants of his powers. He wasn't doing any kind of Illyrian training, again, at least is what we saw, unless he was doing like reps in his room whenever he could, which I could see. But it is not up to Cassian's current standards. However, that's not a dig at Cassian in the slightest. I also think it's important to note that this is probably why Rhys is out of shape.
And now it's really time to talk about this incredible scene, because Cassian bluntly asks Feyre, when are you going to talk about how you wrote a letter to Tamlin telling him you've left for good? Feyre immediately goes on the defense, using the only throwback she has at this group about the perceived love triangle between Mor, Cassian, and Azriel. But of course, it falls flat and Cassian easily brushes it off, though he recognizes this as what it is, going on the offense in retaliation for his probing question. So he makes her get back in the ring. Again, Cassian may be the muscle and the goofball of the group, but he has emotional maturity and awareness that is really showcased right here, both in how he has her work off steam in the ring and in how he apologizes for how he came off, insisting that they don't think it's a joke and what she did was, quote, a really damn hard call.
Cassian is clearly the member who has gone to therapy. That's all I'll say.
Feyre begins doing the hand-to-hand exercises Cassian requests, but all the while, her mind is racing as she comes to terms with everything revolving around Tamlin.
She repeats the words, quote, "You've left for good," over and over again, driving home the finalization and the anxiety of this realization. When coming to the Night Court officially, she mentioned to Rhys only staying here for a little while she figures things out. The subtext is, eventually she's going to go back. Here she is saying that she has changed her mind and found a home elsewhere, and the finality of that decision hasn't really dawned on her until now.
And all through this, Feyre starts really thinking she had been in love with Tamlin, she'd meant it once, but she'd also had rose-colored glasses about his temper, need for control, and need to protect that ran so deep he locked her up like a prisoner. She sacrificed her soul and ripped herself to shreds for that love while he did nothing, refused to risk anything, quote, until there was one night left and all he'd wanted to do wasn't free me, but fuck me. Even as Amarantha tortured and started killing her, all he did was beg. While Feyre doesn't make a direct comparison in this heightened moment, Rhys is the one who took action against Amarantha, and here she highlights that Tamlin didn't try to kill her like Rhys did. Feyre goes on to reflect how once they returned to the Spring Court and Tamlin's powers were restored, he had the nerve to cage her and say she was no longer useful. All of this for his peace of mind. No real care or concern for what she wanted or for her well-being. Yes, he'd given her everything to become herself, helping her transform from the poverty-stricken survivalist to an artist who laughed and loved, but he treated it like there was a start and stop, when that's not how life works. People grow and change and evolve, and their loved ones have to open their eyes to that. And that's one of the best things about having a partner in this life, is to grow and evolve together.
This is such a huge moment for Feyre, but it is also such a huge moment for anyone who has been in an abusive relationship. When you're in the thick of it, there are those rose-colored glasses, shoving down instances, brushing off words or actions, or even blaming yourself for their behavior. But the moment you start distancing yourself fully, you finally have this, holy shit, what I went through was something very, very real. You stop brushing it off and pushing it down. It starts getting like, oh my God, that was a thing. That was a lot. And it cannot be understated, this moment. It is simultaneously so painful and validating at the same time. Just like Feyre, many victims are made to think that they're crazy or they're the dramatic one. The moments like this are so important because you realize maybe it wasn't my fault after all. And you start being a very important word there, to forgive yourself for what you went through. I know for me, I've been in a relationship that, to be quite honest, we do not need to go through on this podcast. But the moment that I forgave myself for what I went through was one of the most healing moments of my entire life. And while I will never forgive my abuser, I will forgive the girl who went through that for 2 years. And that was more healing than anything I've ever done. Gone are the excuses for Tamlin. And in its place is anger. Yes, anger at how she was treated, anger at how they viewed her as weak, even after Under the Mountain, and anger at herself for everything she did for that love. But it is also an understanding that Tamlin is not a bad person with evil intentions. He was just wrong. The anger and acceptance stage being in one blow is honestly so beautiful and impressive for Feyre here.
And as she is finally allowing herself to think all of this, she finds herself sobbing as she keeps punching into the sparring pads that Cassian holds up. But when she stops because she has literally burned through the sparring pads thanks to her fire powers, she finally says aloud what has been eating away at her. I killed them. Cassian says, I know, with grim understanding. And she continues, it should have been me. And there it was.
The way that he is supporting Feyre right now is not unlike how Rhys is supporting Asriel. That is what this family does. When someone needs to unleash, they will take the blow.
This is such a pivotal, beautiful, and heart-wrenching moment in Feyre's healing journey. She fundamentally changed Under the Mountain and did horrific things. And the one person she did this for, the person she loved and trusted, failed her when she needed it most. This truth has been festering inside of her for months since, as we've talked about extensively on the podcast. Back when she arrived at her family's estate in the mortal realm, these muddied thoughts about Tamlin started coming to the surface. But she has felt this terrible guilt that because of his love for her, because of him having a good heart and good intentions, she shouldn't feel this way. So much, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't feel this way, even though that's rarely directly said. And now it has fully been realized and, more importantly, set free. Nowhere in her inner monologue about Tamlin did she mention killing those fairies. Yes, she alluded to it, but she didn't outright refer to them. Yet that is what is at the heart of all of this. It was the catalyst for this fundamental shift, this sacrifice to save Prythian and give Tamlin back his powers. And then No one in the spring court cared. She already felt like it should be her back during the third trial, but that feeling has only compounded since then because no one seemed to care about their deaths or the sacrifice of her soul. I also just have to say how much I love that this truth is shared with Cassian, not Rhys or Mor, who she has shared vulnerability with, but with Cassian. In this moment, she accepts emotional support from Cassian and then from Rhys, both of whom approach her with real understanding. They're not trying to excuse what she did or sweep it under the rug or even make her feel better with flowery words. No, they're here to support her because they know this pain. Rhys steps in with soothing, gentle darkness, and he wraps his wings around Feyre to cocoon her and comfort her. They too are good people who have had to make impossible choices that haunt them each and every day and keep fighting to live another day, not make it go away or dismiss it, but let it ride in the back seat of their life as these hard choices and living with it afterward has shaped who they are. Yet, one of the first things Feyre noticed during the introduction dinner at the House of Wind was that despite experiencing this trauma, they still laugh and live and love. It's one of the reasons she feels this innate connection and draw to them, and why they are specifically the ones who help her on this healing journey. This vulnerable moment with Rhys is so touching. He says he's sorry he didn't find a way to spare her from what happened under the mountain, which is something that keeps him up at night, literally, as he describes his two kinds of nightmares.
Speaking of these nightmares, Rhys realizes Feyre was his mate right before her neck was snapped. And Rhys has the belief of the things I love have a tendency of being taken away from me. It is heartbreakingly on brand that one of the nightmares he has repeatedly is losing his mate only seconds after realizing she is the one for him.
And when he summons darkness again and gives Feyre this comforting but practical advice, it illustrates how complex our moral choices are. Darkness is what you make of it. It's not innately good or bad, and neither are we. As we often highlight, this series and specifically this book is all about choices. Part of those choices are our mindsets and how we approach our choices and live with them afterward. And Rhys demonstrates how you can find light in that darkness, quite literally with the twinkling stars in this darkness they've surrounded themselves in. In the soothing, sparkling darkness, Feyre does something she can't remember the last time she did. She breathes easily. She's letting go of this feeling that she should love Tamlin. She's beginning to let go of this self-loathing for what she did. She's taking her first true step toward forgiving herself.
4 days later, we are back to training with Cassian with some spectators, though, this time being Amren, shortly followed by Mor. Cassian asks Mor where she went off to the other night, not having seen her leave Rita's. SJM is here already planting the seeds for Mor's secret love life. Rita's, we will learn, is a place that many other lesbian females frequent, including Mor, who, quote, practically lives there. We can assume that she left with another woman, given that she's keeping secrets about her whereabouts. Cassian presses her, though, enough to make me wonder, do we think he knows, or at least suspects?
I think that they all have some kind of inkling. Yeah. I really do. I don't think that he would press her in a way to make her reveal it, but it might be him kind of just like, again, like innate curiosity of his, that playfulness, but also that seriousness of checking in on her kind of thing.
And I also think it's there for the reader of like a, hey, there's something here that we don't know, right? We also learned that there was a night out that they dragged Feyre to. She spent the night in the booth talking with Asriel, watching Rhys hold court at the bar, turning down males and females left and right as they, were like, come home with me, your son. I love...
Nicole was one of them there.
I would have actually just climbed on top of him. Thank you very much. 2 things I love about this. Number one, I love that it's another bonding moment for Feyre and Asriel. And I also love that they make a game out of it. Gamifying things is not exactly something we allude to Asriel, but I really love their relationship. Even though it's kind of off page right here, it's growing and it's laying the seeds for it.
And of course, I love how it's Asriel who wins every single round. Of course. He has known his brother for over 500 years. He is a spy master. He knows. Yeah. But we have to note that Feyre is curious about Rhys's sex life. They've already talked about his love life that night after dinner in Velaris, but now she's wondering if he's been with anyone since Amarantha, if he's wanted to be with anyone since. Spoiler alert, the answer is no. He just wants Feyre.
Yay! Back into training, though. Rhys enters the training ring, and we get a quick wing watch. He's in his fine jacket and pants with no wings. We don't usually see him in this sort of garb when he is with his family. But I do think that it's interesting given the fact that they're about to go to the summer court. And I'm guessing that this is the show don't tell if he's prepping to put on that High Lord mask again. And with that, we learn that we are off to the summer court. At least almost all of the Inner Circle is off to the summer court. More, Cassian and Azriel will be staying behind. Azriel continuing his work with the Mortal Queens and spying on them for the book. More with running the city. And Cassian because he's literally not allowed to go. And Cassian does begin to object, though. He's worried that they're going to be ambushed. But like I just said, Cassian's been banned for eternity for destroying one measly building.
And while this plays off as funny, I mean, who hasn't seen a meme about Cassian destroying this building? There is a more serious meaning behind it. We can't help but think of the last time Rhys went off to a function, when Amarantha hosted her first party 50 years ago, and he did not allow his friends to join him as a way to protect them from his intention to kill Amarantha. Well, we all know what happened, and the Inner Circle didn't see him again for almost 50 years. Cassian would rather risk the wrath of the entire summer court than let that happen again. Although Rhys does make a good point about bringing Amaranth along, who is scary and powerful as fuck. I think also Cassian probably just really loves the summer court and wants to go anyway because it's a fun place to be.
Oh, he's a beach bro for sure.
He's totally. And he hates the spring court with the other warm weather because of his allergies. So
he'd be playing beach volleyball. He'd be with the giant beach ball in the water. He'd be having the time of his life.
Oh, is he the lobster guy from SpongeBob? Larry the lobster.
Larry the lobster. Oh my God. But it is Moore who finally breaks through to Larry the Lobster, and Cassian does drop the matter.
Serious stuff aside, though, I really need the short story behind Cassian's escapades in the summer court. There's so much more about the summer court, with its High Lord owing Rhys a favor, all its treasures, and Feyre coming along as a member of the Night Court and the message that relays. But I'm going to put a pin in that for now to explore in detail next episode.
Here's what I will say. I want I'm not really wanting another novella. The only exception is if we get a novella of just a bunch of short stories of Amryn being a massive sports fan, of Cassian leveling one building. I want those stories. I don't need another winter solstice. I don't want another Christmas special. I literally just want all the backstories, just in short novella form. Feyre follows Rhys out and starts flirting with him again, telling Rhys she thinks that he'd have more important things to do than pass notes at night, which Rhys tells her that he can't seem to resist, just like how she cannot resist watching him. Feyre thinks about how flirting with him and fighting with him, which are in their minds basically the same thing, it's easy and fun. And I want to highlight that word easy real quick. We do not know much about Feyre's conversations with Isaac other than the fact that he liked to complain to her about his father expectation, but there's never any mentions of flirting. Tamlin,
I don't think they flirted very much.
Definitely don't.
I don't think
they
so.
With their bodies.
I love you, Isaac.
Average sex lover extraordinaire. Tamlin, flirting was an utter fail at worst, and at best, a D-. Until
he did have some A+ moments. Yes,
until he finally got comfortable with her, and then he started writing limericks. But she was never an easy flirt with him.
His average class grade was like a C+ B-.
Yeah, which ain't great when your entire court is on the line. Let's be real. The first time that she really started flirting with him was when she wore a dress to dinner, and she was so nervous she almost went back and changed. Again, back to that word easy. Rhys is easy to talk to. Again, it's just setting that their relationship, their romance, is above anything else that she's had previously for many reasons. This is just to name one. So much so that she starts to think that maybe, just maybe, she also deserves easy and fun.
And that is the key word right there. This is a really big deal for Feyre to think about herself, that she deserves something to make her feel good. She hasn't thought that she deserves anything. And now, after so much groundwork, so much already healing that she has done, she thinks for a second, just maybe, she deserves easy and fun. I'm so proud of her.
But they're not done. Feyre says that he hasn't been able to keep away from her since Calamai. End quote. Something rippled in his eyes that I couldn't quite place. Rhys's famous multi-page monologue of chapter 54. It's been so long. This is the first time we're mentioning it in this 5-hour recording. I don't want to think about that too much. It says, quote, I couldn't stop being around you and loving you and wanting you. I still can't stay away. So Fae-ra, you were actually technically right on the nose here. He cannot stay away, just for reasons you don't know yet. We will have to wait and see what Fae-ra's sharp tongue will do next episode, though, because we're heading off to the summer court, aka the Fantasy Fangirls Beach episode.
While we already highlighted so many key foreshadowing moments, let's turn our full focus onto foreshadowing to the rest of this book and important moments in the series. We get a big Papa Archeron clue for ACOWAR. He's in Neva, quote, attending a summit about the threat above the wall. Yes, he is. And he's going to come sailing in. Come sail away. Come sail away. With his allies and armies to help save the day from Hybern.
Elaine mentions how Lord Nolan's battlements wouldn't be enough to keep her safe from the oncoming war. When the wall is destroyed in ACOWAR, our crew will indeed go to Lord Nolan's estate and ask him to take in humans as protection for the upcoming war. Unfortunately, their request does not go very well, at least at the time. But then Grayson goes and storms the army, and pretty sure, does he live? He lives. Yeah, he lives. Never mind.
Yes, he does live.
Isaac doesn't, though.
My poor Isaac. We don't know that, but
that's probably do not.
As Fae-ra brings Rhys and co. into the Archeron house, she thinks about what Tamlin did for her family, though she knows that his own was murdered by a rival court for, quote, whatever reason no one had ever explained to me. Well, it was Rhys and his father, and they certainly did have their reasons that Rhys will share with her soon enough. As Fae-ra is introducing her sisters to the Bat Boys, she thinks, quote, how it would be to speak to them while I remained this way while their skin had grown paper thin and wrinkled, their backs curved with the weight of years, their white hands speckled. It's this exact reasoning as to why Ianthe, quote, thought, major air quotes there, Fae-ra would want them turned high fae.
Speaking of that introduction, the sisters are stiff as boards when they meet these two powerful Illyrians. Well, later the boys are going to be stiff as boards in their presence because they will indeed pair off and get much more familiar with each other, some more than others. Nesta is pretty pissed about Fae-ra's reaction with the food, wondering if Fae-ra is just too good for human food now. However, in ACOWAR, once she has had the food of Prythian, Nesta will admit that she now understands Fae-ra's preference for fairy food.
As Rhys tries to settle the tension with the oldest Archeron sister about the food in Prythian being different, she says, quote, I have little interest in ever setting foot in your land, so I'll have to take your word on it. Oh, little do you know, Nesta Archeron.
When Fae-ra and Rhys are training, Rhys mentions how he should take Fae-ra to the Illyrian steppes because they're much more interesting and warmer. Oh, they will go to the Illyrian steppes because that's where their one-bed adventure is. And I don't know about warmer, though, but it's definitely warmer in some ways. When we're watching the Adder's torture through Rhys's POV, he thinks about how he will need to pay a visit to Hewn City soon and, quote, remind them who holds their leash. And pay them a visit soon you will, good sir, with a throne scene on top. My favorite! Rhys is rummaging through the Adder's mind and sees no sign of the book being in their minds or Jurian walking about. Correct, Jurian is currently healing after getting resurrected from the Cauldron, and the Book of Breathings is not even on their minds, at least not until our crew starts going after it.
Rhys says to Fae-ra, you know how far Tamlin can be driven to protect what he thinks is his. Yes, indeed, he will be driven to literally ally himself and bargain with the worst kind of evil, which is a very interesting decision that I can't wait to dive into, as he will have his own ulterior motives too.
As they head off to Rita's, Cassian tells Moore that he's not dancing, and she says, quote, thank the mother, you nearly shattered my foot last time you tried. Moore will go on to give Cassian dance lessons so that he can keep up with So You Think You Can Dance champ Nesta Archeron. When training with Cassian, Fae-ra takes a moment and drinks up the sight of Rhys and Azriel sparring shirtless. There will be another Archeron sister who will indeed watch her mate and Azriel spar, but her drinking up the image will take a quite different turn than Fae-ra's does.
Speaking of naughty Nesta, Fae-ra thinks about Cassian and Nesta's interactions and how he is, quote, unable to resist matching himself against Nesta's spirit of steel and flame. Flame foreshadowing for Nesta's silver flame powers, but also steel foreshadowing her future as a Valkyrie. Amren comments that she'll remove Cassian's favorite part, small as it might be. Friends, it's not small at all. It is in fact enormous, as we will learn in full detail in Silver Flames.
You texted me, Cassian is hung, when you first read that, and I had to Google what hung meant because I didn't.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Dead serious.
Oh, you poor sweet summer child.
I did not like that Google search. Last but not least, Feyre thinks about how she wishes Nesta was with her in the training ring, only to watch her and Cassian go head to head. A sentence that summarized all of Silver Flames right there. Now it is time to sip some tea with the Suriel. Every episode, Lexi will sip some tea with our Suriel and walk us through a world building topic to help us better understand this world and the people in it.
Today's Suriel topic is Velaris. I know we've already talked about the city in episode 3, but let's take a closer look at everything we know about Velaris, including its history, layout, culture, people, and so much more. And I called in reinforcements for today's Suriel segment, so big thank you to our Patreon members, Aria and Sammy, for helping fill in the details. Velaris, also known as the Court of Dreams or the City of Starlight, is a hidden, massive city in the Night Court. It is, unsurprisingly, best viewed at night, where some of its citizens choose to be awake at night and sleep during the day so they can enjoy it at its maximum beauty. Thousands of years ago, the Night Court was ruled from the Court of Nightmares, aka the Hewn City, which is under the mountain located in the Night Court. Remember, Amarantha's Under the Mountain was in the middle, and it was fashioned after this Hewn City in the Night Court. An ancient High Lord of the Night Court had a different vision for his territory, though, and he dreamed of somewhere better for his people. Instead of allowing the world to see his lands vulnerable at a time of change, he sealed the Night Court's borders and staged a coup, eliminating the worst of the courtiers and predators. Then he built Velaris for the dreamers, establishing trade and peace. To preserve this precious city, he kept Velaris a secret from outsiders, and so have his descendants. This may make you wonder, how do these High Lords of the Night Court keep such a big city hidden from all outsiders? Its High Lord founder, as well as his descendants, placed powerful spells on Velaris. For instance, those who trade in Velaris are unable to say anything about the city and possess the skill to convincingly lie in order to keep the origin of their goods and ships hidden from the rest of the world. There is a rumor that this ancient High Lord cast his very life's blood upon the stones and river to keep the spell eternal. There are also wards placed around the city to protect it from dangerous outsiders, which we learn can be broken by very powerful magic, like the Cauldron. We're not sure if this is the same magic, but a good example of how this could work is the glamour that was around Cretea. It was so powerful that it even worked on Rhys. In addition to spells and wards cast on the city, the High Lords of the Night Court keep the Hewn City the face of this territory and its people. They let everyone who live outside of Velaris believe that the Night Court is home to the worst kind of Fae, like those in the Hewn City, which is called the Court of Nightmares for a reason. The Hewn City is the buffer, because without its fearsome reputation, some courts and kingdoms might strike the Night Court and discover the many secrets it's hidden from the other High Lords and courts for these millennia. While we don't know anything else, we do know that about 5,000 years ago, there was an attack on Velaris. But unfortunately, I don't have any other information to provide about that. So we do know that it is possible and there have been attacks, but it's been 5,000 years since the last one. In the present day, Mor oversees both the Hewn City and Velaris. Rhys, of course, lives in Velaris and only makes occasional visits to the Hewn City to keep up the facade as an evil ruler. When Amarantha took over 50 years ago and tricked Rhys out of his power, he used his remaining seconds of power to erase the city and wards from the minds of the Court of Nightmare party attendees, which, side note, this isn't very consistent because Rhys has also stated that the Court of Nightmares is blind to Velaris' existence, so apologies about that conflicting info. Maybe a select few were allowed to know about Velaris for whatever reasons, although I believe the emphasis is more on knowledge about his inner circle, which those in the Court of Nightmares would certainly know about. In these precious few seconds left of having his powers, Rhys also threw a shield around Velaris to bind it to his inner circle so that they had to remain or risk that protection collapsing. I believe this shield is in addition to the existing spells and wards as an extra precaution that made Velaris truly hidden and invisible versus simply not known to the outside world. Rhys also notes that his ruthless ancestors were willing to do anything to preserve a piece of goodness in our wretched world. Rhys does state that perhaps it is Velaris' loss to be so contained and isolated from the rest of the world, but as a whole, the city doesn't seem to suffer from it. All right, let's get into the city layout here. Velaris is built like a crust atop rolling steep hills. These hills are flanked by a broad, winding river called the Sidra River that snakes across the landscape into the sea. You can find plenty of ships on the Sidra River as well. At the northern edge of Velaris is a wall of flat-topped mountains of red stone. The House of Wind is located in the middle and largest peak of the mountain, and to the north are different kinds of mountains that surround the city across the river. Basically, this is my Colorado dream city, an incredible, vast city with lots of mountains and so much culture. I love it. I want to live here so badly. The city's buildings are crafted out of white marble, warm sandstone, and the same red stone of the flat-topped mountains. Many quarters of Velaris are full of townhouses with green copper roofs and white chimneys. And friends, Velaris has everything you could dream of. There are 4 main market squares called palaces. 2 are on the southern side and 2 are on the northern side, with the Sidra River dividing north and south. We have the Palace of Thread and Jewels, which sells clothes, shoes, supplies for making both, and endless amounts of jewelry. Then there are the Palace of Bone and Salt and Palace of Hoof and Leaf, which are twin squares on opposite sides of the river. This is where you go grocery shopping. Get your meats, produce, prepared food, livestock, confections, and all the spices here. This is where you can find Nicole. The 4th palace, which we presume is located on the northern side of the Sidra River, is unknown. So sorry, no information there. We also have the famous Rainbow of Velaris, which is the artist quarter and home to the performing arts and 100 galleries. It is a brightly painted pocket in the city, built on top of one of the hills that flows to the river's edge. At night, it glows like a fistful of jewels as if the colors come alive in the moonlight. There are 5 notable theaters in Velaris, and the most famous is Glittering Gold near the top of the hill. There's also an amphitheater on the sea cliffs, which honestly sounds like it can rival even our beloved Red Rocks. There are tower bells that ring throughout Velaris, and Velaris additionally has lots of tea shops, restaurants, pleasure clubs, concert halls, wine rooms, you name it. And while there aren't many, Velaris does have some iffy, you don't want to go there taverns, like the Wolf's Den, which is the worst, that Nesta will come to know well. But hey, it still has music there. Also, I love that it's called the Wolf's Den and the correspondence with Nesta. I just caught that. The homes and shops use warming magic, specifically in popular outdoor spaces, so that even in the wintertime, you can enjoy the outdoors and all that the city has to offer. Again, as a Colorado girl, I would absolutely love this for year-round patio usage. As for homes, we don't know a whole lot about the housing situation, but for the most part, there are many nice townhomes and apartments throughout the city, and I'm sure some houses too. Then there is, of course, the river house that members of our inner circle will eventually call home. Velaris doesn't have any slums, but there is an area in the north side of the Sidra River that is grim by Velaris' standards, where Nestor will reside later. All right, let's talk about the culture and life in Velaris. I've been describing the facts about Velaris, but it's so important to emphasize how lively and vibrant and captivating this city is. Velaris is full of life and music and culture. Its people love this city, and it's like the circle of life, where the city gives to its people and the people give back to the city, and it's also serene and joyful. Its people seem unhurried, and it is apparent that they have prospered in peace for thousands of years. And after the attack on Velaris, which we will discuss in more detail later, I'm focusing on Velaris more as it is right now in our books, its citizens come together as a community to rebuild it. The city is predominantly occupied by high fae, but there are plenty of other fairies here too. And Prithian's traditional hierarchy of fairies doesn't really apply here. Rhys does say at one point that he has tried unsuccessfully to implement that, but from what Farah observes, everyone really blends together. It is a big melting pot. Everyone is at home and welcome here. As for fashion, Farah has observed that there are high fae in various forms of dress, some in winter coats, some wearing mortal fashions with layers and poofy skirts and lace, some in riding leathers. This is to say, Velaris' citizens wear all types of clothing from various origins, and everyone can simply be themselves. Velaris is also a haven for LGBTQ plus fae, specifically a pleasure hall called Rita's, where our dear Moore frequents most nights, and the owner is, quote, like her. Come the holidays, Velaris is very festive. Starfall in the Night Court is known throughout Prithian, though it is extra special for those in Velaris. Obviously, no one else knows about how big of a deal it is for Velaris because they don't know about Velaris. But hey, it's really fun to be at Starfall in Velaris. Winter Solstice is another majorly celebrated holiday in Velaris, as we will learn all all about in Frost and Starlight. We'll talk more about the holidays as they come up in the deep dives. To wrap up this Suriel segment, here are a few fun facts about Velaris. It has incredible and flavorful food, rich with spices, as we all know from Spice Watch, and Velaris' breeze smells like salt and lemon verbena. Lastly, the view of the artist quarter is Rhys and his sister's favorite view, or was his sister's favorite view. There you go, everyone. Everything you need to know about Velaris. All right, friends, now let's move on to our favorite moments. The small descriptions that illustrate how different Fae-vorite is now that she's Fae. Quote, "The tang of their terror coated my tongue." It shows just how different humans and Fae are and how much Fae truly do have the upper hand. Asriel says that Illyrians are born hearing the song of the wind. We learn later that his shadows dance to music and he sings softly to himself. Just love this little nod to that as he explains how they're called to flying.
Fae-vorite claps back at Rhys, wanting to be extra careful in the human realm with, quote, "This one is only cranky because he's old and it's past his bedtime." Classic. When training with Cassian, Fae-vorite realizes that her tattoo was made with Illyrian markings, which are a symbol of luck and glory on the battlefield. And Fae-vorite wonders if this is why Rhys picked this pattern, wishing her luck and glory against Amarantha. It's lines like that that make ACOTAR a totally new reading experience.
Again, when training with Cassian, he knows that Rhys is out of shape, but Asriel is too polite to beat him to the dirt. Love the dynamic of these three brothers. Az is polite and respectful, not willing to whoop Rhys's ass, whereas you know that's exactly what Cassian would do and probably has done, and he does not hold back.
Fae-vorite tells Rhys she's shocked that there are not more mirrors in the training ring so he can ogle his muscles, which sends Asriel into a coughing fit and causes Cassian to clamp his hand over his mouth. I love that they are just living it up, watching their brother get absolutely roasted. Amren is cleaning her nails with a tiny bone. That's all.
On that same note, Cassian tells Amren to get off her ass and give him 20 lunges, to which she viciously snarls, and they're about to go at each other's throats. I would have loved to see this, but I'd also like to give my Illyrian Leva more credit, and it would be an epic showdown.
Amren would absolutely wreck him. I'm pretty sure she would absolutely destroy him. All right, friends, we are about to get into our Maasverse Madness segment, which has spoilers for the entire Throne of Glass and Crescent City series.
If you've only read ACOTAR, before you leave, next episode we will be covering chapters 32 through 37, aka the Summer Court. And hey, if you want more content, more community, more events, join the Patreon party. And if you're not following us on Instagram and TikTok, what are you doing? Give us a follow at Fantasy Fangirls Pod.
Also, do not forget to rate and review the podcast. It takes 2 seconds, and it's one of the nicest things you can do to all of your podcasts that you listen to. And of course, the most important thing of all, share this episode with your fellow ACOTAR friends. If you read this passage of, 9 chapters and you're like, not a lot happens in this, but then you're like, oh, a lot happens in this, you can share it with someone who will also need that wake-up call.
All right, we are now entering our Maasverse Madness segment of the episode, where we call out series crossover references and discuss theories. Again, today is featuring the entire Maasverse, so spoilers for all of Throne of Glass and Crescent City books.
Let us dive into our second popular theory around Mor. Is Mor a witch? OK Scientist 69, nice, posted on Reddit. There are a number of similarities between Mor and the way that the witches of the Tog series are described. Red in Throne of Glass is associated with that of the Kraken witches. Red, as we discussed earlier, is a color that Mor wears regularly. Mor's power also manifested at her first period, similar to our witches. Quality Garbage X, these are perfect names. I love it.
The Reddit usernames are my favorite.
God, it's quality humor. Commented on the same Reddit post about how in mythology, the Morgan is often considered a triple goddess. Who do the witches in the Tog universe worship? The 3-faced goddess. Most witches also cannot wield magic. That is until they do the yielding. Maybe this is why we haven't seen Mor's powers on full display outside of healing and winnowing. However, I will say the Kraken witches are the exception. More on this in a moment. Guava Fox on the same Reddit post also commented that Mor was also marked on her belly just as Asterin was, which is a sad comparison. And last but not least on this Reddit article, C Girl pulled the quote, "Mor is who I call in when the armies fail and Cassian and Asriel are both dead. Could this be because she is capable of the yielding," which we see to devastating lengths in Kingdom of Ash. I will not say more because Lexi has not read that book yet.
I still need to read this damn book.
I need you to read it so I can fully talk about it because that is something I will not spoil for you. I refuse. Still on this subject, though, I want to move back to the Kraken witches connection because for this, I had to call in reinforcements, and I mean literally call. So thank you, Lauren from Book Huddle, who spent 30 minutes on the phone with me and then another 2 days sending articles back and forth to pull this together. Legitimately, most of these are her findings. She's a genius. We love Lauren on this podcast. 500 years ago, when the Witch Wars happened, the Kraken witches were thus scattered across the continent, and they searched for the one Kraken witch who could reverse the curse placed on the Witch Kingdom. The curse was placed on the Witch Kingdom by the last Kraken queen 500 years ago. This 500-year timeline really stood out. What if Mor's mother was the Kraken queen, Rhiannon Kraken I? Rhiannon, the name, translates to divine queen. Morgan, the name, translates to phantom queen. In A Court of Frost and Starlight, when Mor is greeted by Kier, she thinks, quote, the sneering tone, she could still hear the hissed insults behind it, whispered long ago in her family's private suite, whispered at every meeting and gathering when her cousin was not present, her cousin meaning Rhys. Half-breed monstrosity, a disgrace to the bloodline. We of course assume that they're talking about Rhys, yes, but could they also be talking about Mor as a half-breed monstrosity of a witch and a high fae? At the end of this book, the Kingdom of Hybern says to Mor, quote, what a mighty queen you are. And Mor slowly backs away at these words. That could tie back into her power and her name literally meaning phantom queen, or it could tie into her blood lineage through the Kraken line if her mother was the last Kraken queen. Other notes on the Kraken, they are known to be peaceful and beautiful, taking much more after their Fae ancestors rather than their Vogue. Because they take after their Fae ancestors, this also means that they are able to use more magic. For example, Rhiannon Kraken II, who Manon kills, she inherited magical abilities unique to the Krakens, one of which being able to glamour. But what if other magical abilities unique to the Krakens include truth? Rhiannon Kraken I in the Witch Mirror flashback is described as looking just like Manon, of course tying us into what happens to Manon in Kingdom of Ash. But she, Rhiannon Kraken I, has a crown of stars in this flashback, a symbol we highly associate with the Night Court. This is only part one of this crack theory and will be continued when we get to the Veritas Orb, because Lauren sent me something that quite literally blew my mind. I will tell you off air, Lex. And here are my personal thoughts on this theory. I love this. I think it would be a really powerful way of tying the Tog world and the ACOTAR world, especially. There might be some things that we find, especially as we go through ACO War and stuff like that. And especially for a character like Mor, who is more mysterious. And I think that it would be just so cool if it ties those two worlds together.
So now a few more quick Throne of Glass and Crescent City 3 things. Feyre notes how Velaris is misty. Now you might be like, well, that's just the weather. Hold on. We've discussed the mist around the prison, but the mist in Velaris is very important given that it's one of the first things Bryce notices when she arrives. And we have to wonder, why does Bryce arrive in Velaris in the first place instead of one of the other nearby thin places like the prison? We learn in CC3 that mist equals thin places that are easier to travel to. So while we have never gotten a direct comparison about Velaris being a thin place, this is something to really and truly be on the lookout for, because there are a lot of little pieces that are falling into place here.
In Rhys's Darkness is What You Make of It speech, he says that there is the darkness of assassins. I love this subtle nod to Celaena Sardathian and her morally gray nature as a protagonist. As our crew frequents Rita's, you also cannot help but think of Azriel loving most of Bryce's music from the bonus chapter of CC3. Azriel is described as being on board with the, quote, pulsing thumping of club music.
Unsu, unsu.
He's asking her again to play the, quote, pleasure hall music. It does make me wonder what kind of music they play at Rita's, because if the like pulsing club music that Bryce shows him is something he's like, oh, this is fun and interesting, but like, what do they play at Rita's?
The piano version of the unsu, 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 unsu. I don't know.
It's the violin version of Get Low, actually.
All right, friends, we need to stop this right now. We are getting delirious. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode 5. Next week, like we mentioned, we will be covering chapters 32 through 37, aka the Summer Court.
Thank you, as always, to our executive producer, Hayden, aka our manager. We love you.
And if you want more content, more community, more events, join the Patreon party. Link is in the show notes.
Do not forget also to sign up for our newsletter. We email you once a month with a whole buku of goodies, and we are coming up on our May email. So be sure to sign up for that. Link in the show notes.
And be sure to follow us on TikTok and Instagram. We are very active on Instagram stories. We have so much fun on social media. Give us a follow at Fantasy Fangirls Pod.
Do not forget also to rate and review the show. It is one of the most helpful things you can do for all of the podcasts you listen to. And last but not least, share this episode with your fellow ACOTAR friends. If you have friends who would want to hear two girls sing a terrible version of the Get Low violin music, you're welcome. Goodbye.
All right, everybody. We love you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have we not done an episode in 45 years? I feel like I've
We haven't. No.
in front of the smart. I can do this. Okay.
And stroke.
I didn't finish that sentence. Mentioning what? I don't know.
I have no idea what I wrote. Oh, dear.
Whoa, why did it get so dark in your room? Last time in this office. You look like you're in a dungeon cell right now. Do you want to?
I know. Well, give me 2 seconds.
It's better than you looking like you were in a mafia movie.
No, I was doing a huzzah.
It looked like you were like, I have something to say.
Despite my run walk jog. Despite my run walk, despite my run walk jogs. Despite my run walk jogs.
I'm so sorry, Lexi. Can you say that one more time? Spit.
Cry baby.
I didn't have an end to that sentence. I just started it and just hoped for the best.
This is why we should never ever do this many chapters in one stretch. What were we thinking? And here we were saying this is going to be a filler episode.